Chapter 13. The Enemy. However many copies of Antonio Torres there were, this was no time to be fainting. I told Lisa what had happened with Jim Graham, and she said, "He pulled out his own tongue and internal organs? Huh. So he emptied out his body. He threw the insides into the ocean, but his back at base. So what's inside his body?" There was no doubt in my mind. Antonio Torres showed himself moments before Jim snapped. There was no sign of him after he crashed, but he hadn't just vanished into thin air like some sort of ghost. Had he climbed inside Jim while I was trying to snap a second photograph? "If that theory's correct," Lisa went on, "then the problem is, he retains enough to fly a plane and blend in at the base without anyone realising he isn't the real Jim. Antonio Torres was a mean kid, but not stupid. And if knowledge and personality are harboured in the skin, then that's a vital fact me and the other Hamon warriors need to know." Antonio had acquired a shocking new power to escape the pain of his mother's abuse. He could shed his own skin like a snake, give it to his batshit crazy mom. But for that skin to remain alive yet dead was... "Two other problems," Lisa said. "If he's wearing Jim Graham's body, how is Antonio Torres walking around in broad daylight?" Oh, right, I thought. Some of the gremlin sightings reported small 50cm ones showing up in the day, but the 1 metre 30cm ones only appeared at night or on cloudy days. "Second, we have an intelligent zombie who can hide inside a human being, allowing them to operate during the day. And by simple arithmetic, there's more than 16,000 of these. If they weren't messing about with planes for fun, but to learn the construction and how to fly them, that could be very bad. Zombies can move anywhere in the world very quickly, and there are a lot of dead bodies lying around right now. If the zombies brought those bodies to life, and those new zombies attacked the living, creating even more zombies, then the zombie empire would expand explosively, far faster than any pyramid scheme." A ripple of alarm went through the Hamon warriors around us. Lisa turned to face straight in the others. "Antonio Torres was on La Palma and knows about the Hamon warriors. He knows I'm one of them, and he's seen me come to get George, so I'm sure he's already taken action. Whatever he does next will be big. We have to move quickly ourselves, while keeping an eye on the English Air Force." Straight said, nodding. "But how can we fight zombies flying fighter planes? We can't lace the ship's bullets with Hamon, and Hamon doesn't travel through the air. Sitting in the cockpit, there's no way for us to touch the zombies directly." "Don't worry, George will shoot them all down," Lisa said. She wasn't smiling. Whoa, I thought. But then, boom! A huge impact rocked the ground. Reminded me that we were on a battlefield. A Hamon warrior came rushing in. "Enemy attack! The English are bombing us!" No sooner had the word left his mouth than the hallway exploded, blowing him away. Kaboom! A cloud of smoke and dust was left behind. The lights went out. Lisa! George! Our cries overlapped. I reached out my hand and found she'd done the same, and our hands clasped. "This way!" she yelled, and pulled me after her into a run. Thud! Boom! More explosions shook the underground headquarters. The ceiling fell and the walls crumbled as we ran past. "How did they find us?" Lisa asked. "They must have tailed us in the motorizing," I said. "Impossible! Stephen and I would have noticed if we were followed. I was watching for that the whole time." "Then you've got a mole." "Huh?" The underground passage led down to a cave that opened onto the ocean, and the cave had been modified into a harbour. As we burst out of the passage, Stephen waved his hand. "George! Over here!" 2 hydroplane motorizings were floating in the harbour, and Lisa and I jumped into one. The engine was already running and the propellers spinning. The second we were in the cockpit, Stephen yelled, "You know how to fly it, right, George?" I threw him a thumbs up. "Got it! I've been flying a while now." "Then we'll have no problem with those monsters. They're just copying what they saw real pilots do." Damn straight. Stephen and I started our planes taxiing. We ran side by side through the cave, engine sputtering, 2 walls of water spraying up behind us. The moment we left the cave mouth, we started rising. I looked up and at a glance saw at least a dozen English Air Force Sopwith camels whirling overhead, dropping bombs on the hidden base. "Stop it!" I shouted, but to no avail. Between the thunder of the bombs and the roar of our engines, my voice never reached them, and my friends flying those camels were already dead. I passed close enough to make sure, and the pilot's eyes were focused on nothing, his head twisted in an unnatural direction, a horrible smile on his face. Lisa reached up from behind and put her hand on my shoulder. "I'm fine. Thanks," I said, but I doubt she heard me. The pilots I'd fought alongside were gone now. Planes that had given me courage were just enemy machines now. But I was glad to know for sure. I accepted it, and it gave me strength. "Thanks," I thought. "You've made it easier to pull the trigger. Now I can focus on protecting the Hamon warriors." Rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat, my machine gun fired. One plane down and Stephen was starting his attack. The other planes noticed us coming and began fighting back, but they were no match for our experience. We took them down one at a time. No wasted bullets. Get behind them and put a few through their engine. Boom! They just gaped at the bullet holes. I mean, they were already dead. I flew between two camels, shooting out their wings. They broke up in the air and the plane started spinning. I dodged them and shot out the belly of the next camel. Boom! It exploded in the air and I dodged the fragments, did a loop and looked for my next target. I heard a machine gun firing behind me, shook off the zombie who'd had the nerve to shoot at me, did a quick turn, got his back and pulled the trigger. The bullets hit the body but no blood emerged from the holes. Instead something came slithering up out of him. Antonio Torres, with no eyes. I didn't hesitate to send more bullets his way. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. I shredded his flat body with bullets, pulverizing it. There was a smile on my face, but tears streaming down my cheeks. He'd bullied me daily, always come after me, killed my friends and attacked the heroes who could save mankind. And now I was going to kill the shit out of him. Bang, 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 bang. Another zombie pilot came at me before I could wipe the tears away. Rat-a-tat, boom, rat-a-tat, vroom, vroom. The plane spiraled away, trailing smoke, and I had just made sure it smashed into the ground, when the other motorizing shot across my field of vision with a zombie plane on its heels, guns firing. I quickly dropped my nose, firing down at the zombie plane, and it blew up just as I passed it, which was a little too close for comfort. "Sorry, Lisa. You aren't hurt?" I asked, and turned around to find her eyes sparkling. "I'm fine. You're amazing, George. So strong." Lisa had never said anything like that to me. I went bright red, but the zombie I just killed had been a better pilot than me, a better shot, and had way more ideas for acrobatic tricks. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat! I shot out the wings of another camel and the pilot stood up in his seat, turned towards me, opened his mouth, and paper-thin Antonio Torres came slithering out of him, spread himself out, and came soaring towards us like a flying squirrel. "Jorge Joestar! You got a lot of nerve growing up before I did!" he shouted as he flew, and I broke up laughing. That was his big problem. Behind me, Lisa said, "Okay, this is my job." She stood up, and her skirt instantly turned inside out. As I gaped at her beautiful legs, she said, "George, when this war's over, let's get married." "Eh? Okay." "Huh?" "Come on, Antonio Torres. You remember me, right?" Flying Squirrel Antonio yelped. Lisa! Seriously? Bosa Blanca really is a pathetic, limp-dicked motherfucker." It had been a while since I'd heard him sing that song, and it rattled me a bit. But I yelled back, "Say's the undead flat dick! I knew you were always a hollow son of a bitch, but I guess you want to blame that shit on your psycho mom, huh?" "What the fuck?" Apparently mentioning his mom really ticked him off, and he bared his fangs and jumped to me, but I couldn't dodge. Just before his teeth sank into my neck, Lisa's thin arm reached down and grabbed a handful of his. "Let go of me, ugly!" Antonio really hadn't changed at all. He was just like he'd been when we were kids, and that was both dumb and kinda unnerving. Lisa said curtly, "I have no words to waste on you." "What? You?" Antonio began, but cracks began spreading out from where Lisa was holding him, and his body turned to dust, scattered away on the winds. Lisa dusted her hands off and sat back down. "5 more. You have enough bullets?" "Yeah, I had enough for 50. Bang, 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 boom, rat-a-tat, kaboom! My bullets hit the zombie planes, destroying their wings or engines. "The Germans are way better," I shouted, but of course they were. The enemy pilots were enemies, but they were also pilots and I had respect for their skills. But I felt no such thing for these zombies. I was just pissed they were flying around in the English Air Force's valuable equipment. Fucking Antonio Torres, forcing me to shoot down English planes. Stephen shot down 2 as well. I hadn't been counting, but Lisa said I'd shot down 23. Shooting down that many in a single dogfight would normally make me a flying ace. Sadly, since I was fighting zombies instead of real pilots, my claim was invalid. Wasn't even worth bragging about. All I could think about was what a race to planes it was. The Hamon warriors were checking the wreckage, running Hamon through the pilots' bodies just in case, killing the Antonios. That was too easy, I thought. I'd spent years slowly learning how to fly a plane, then attacked the English Air Force and stole their pilots and planes, and that was the best they could muster. The only damage to the Hamon warriors had been in the initial bombing. Since their base had been on the ground, the damage had been limited. Antonio Torres must have known how good a pilot I was, so he should have known things would turn out this way. He was a crafty bastard, after all. So what was the point of this battle? Either a diversion or an attempt to delay me. Either way, the assumed intent of the attack, wiping out the warriors, wasn't the real goal. So what was? Then I remembered. That piece of shit had promised to kill my family. Lisa! I need a phone. I called my mother. Star Mark Tradings, the company she ran near the London harbour. I wasn't panicking yet, but she'd seen them coming. A lot of planes just flew in off the sea. Calm down. Mum, get Penelope, leave London and get to the house in Westwood. Now. Whatever for, George? What's going on? All those planes were English. Everyone's getting ready to celebrate the return of the triumphant heroes. Triumphant? The planes are all in the States. They've got bullet holes in them, or wings that were clearly broken were patched together again. Planes filled with the war dead. I looked out the window. It was still light out. But in England? Is the sun out? It's not raining, but it's very cloudy. Mum? I understand. I'll go back to the Joestar mansion and hide in the basement with Penelope and Jonathan. Where are you? France, but I'm with Lisa. Oh, then you're safe. But the Hamon warriors can't fly planes, and what's flying into London are dead pilots. But they don't have Antonio inside them. If the sun wasn't out, they wouldn't need to let Antonio fly. If the dead pilots were still as good as they'd been alive, this time we might be in for a real fight. I'm gonna have to fight. Oh, your father fought his own battle, and he won. I'm sure you'll emerge victorious too. Thank you. I'll get there as fast as I can. Hurry, Mum. Yes, don't forget about me. I'm leaving now. I love you, George. I love you too, Mum. I hung up, then had an idea, and dialed another number. What? Jorge Joestar? If you're calling, you must be part of that huge squad in the sky, huh? What's up with that? Some sort of air show? Did England win some big victory I didn't hear about? The excited man who answered was John Moore Brabazon. He'd quit flying planes 5 years ago after Charles Roll's accident, but he was still working as an engineer in the city. Promise to believe what I tell you, John? I said. What? Of course. Don't be stupid. Those guys flying in aren't us. They're enemies. They're not even human. They're all dead. They've returned from hell to make the living like them. George, what the... Look at those planes closely, John. Recognise any of them? Those planes belong to dead men. They shouldn't be in the air. Dead men? Huh? What? That's Rupert Stiller's Mary. And David Seymour's Emma. Both of them were former Royal Aero Club members lost in combat. Mary and Emma were both Henry Farman III's, planes made in France. John found former friend after former friend in the sky. He'd been flying from the very start, so he knew a lot of fallen pilots. Joe Dearlove's up there too, he said. I could hear him crying. I kept my voice calm. They're all dead, but something evil has dragged our dead friends out from someplace very dark. John, they're going to kill Englishmen and eat them. Eat? What do you mean? I mean that literally. They eat living humans. They never do that. They aren't the friends you knew. Your dead friends are still dead. They haven't come back to life. Their bodies have just stepped out of their graves and into those planes. Ah! I heard an explosion on the other end of the line. It was starting. What the fuck? English planes attacking London! John, calm down and listen. You and anyone else alive out there have to fight them. I'll be there as soon as I can, you hear me? What the fuck? God damn it, stop! John yelled. He put the receiver down. So I yelled down the line. John Moore Brazabon, listen, This is in your hands. Get as many men together as you can, get them in their planes and start fighting back. Don't fuck around. Just do it. They're already dead, and they won't die if you just kill them normally. You gotta annihilate them. This was a horrible thing to say, but I had to put it like that. George! Is this really happening? John, I'm flying there as soon as I hang up. You fight and you live through this, okay? There was another explosion and the line went dead in the middle. I put the phone down, turned around and found the Hamon warriors listening, dressed for war. The main force is attacking England, I said. They're flying planes that were shot down, the pilots killed. They're English planes, so they faced no resistance until they started the attack. They're already over London, and it sounds like they just started firing. By the time we get there, their invasion will be well underway. Contact any Hamon warriors in England. If any of them have contacts in the army, direct them to fight back. There will be plenty of zombies shot down who survived, so we need men on the ground as well. Tell anyone you know to run and hide. I'm heading off to fight. I'll knock as many zombies as I can out of the sky. Please save any survivors. We all ran. When Lisa tried to jump on the motorising after me, I said, Lisa, it'll be dangerous. She ignored me. She was still wearing a skirt, so I said, sure you don't want to put some trousers on? She just laughed. Don't worry, I've been a girl a while. I figured out how to keep the contents of my skirt hidden. That wasn't what I was driving at, but this was Lisa. If she said she'd be fine, she'd be fine. Oh, but I'll take these, she said, stealing my aviator hat. Oh, you can keep this, she said, handing the goggles back. Fine. Stephen was climbing into the plane next to us. Honestly, that last fight had just proved how little combat experience he had. But I didn't stop him. Once again, Stephen and I sped out of the cave for the ocean and the sky. We took a quick look back at the condition of the surface after the bombing, and then headed west across the North Sea. The attack had been intense, but like I thought, relatively few casualties. It was an hour's flight from here to London. How bad would the invasion be before he got there? The dead were mostly flying planes lost in the war, but how well armed were they? If they only had the ammo they'd been shot down with, then probably not that much. But Torres wasn't likely to half-ass something like that. He'd already taken over the English Naval Air Force headquarters, so he'd mostly likely stolen all the bombs and bullets he needed. This was going to be brutal. Hey George, Lisa said. I got a favour to ask. What? Can you give me a quick rundown on how to fly a plane? By the time we were almost across the North Sea, Lisa was flying my motorising. And other planes more or less work the same? Yeah, what you need to control them is always the same, and basically they all have a long body with rings and propellers in front. Got it, she said, looking over the instrument panel in a way that made me worried. What are you planning? Last time I just sat behind you and couldn't do anything, right? So this time I thought I'd go for broke. I got even more worried. Go for broke how? Whatever occurs to me in a moment. Oh, right, she said, and turned the stick over to the side, placing us in front of Stephen. George, take over. Eh? Lisa stood up. I scrambled into the cockpit next to her and grabbed the flight stick, and she moved, but not into the back seat. She jumped out into thin air. Lisa! She jumped with so little wind-up I thought it was accidental, but she tied the loose end of the thread in her scarf to the control stick. The thread was unravelling quickly and stretched from my plane to the air above Stephen's. Lisa let go of the thread and landed right behind Stephen. Stephen looked every bit as flabbergasted as I was. I quickly shifted my plane so I was flying next to him, and heard her shouting something at Stephen. Don't worry, she said, and then put her hands on his shoulders, brushed them gently down his back to his shoulder blades, gave him a push, and then pulled back from him, and Stephen's wings came out in her palms. Stephen looked surprised by this, but didn't appear to be in pain. Once the big white rings were both fully emerged from his back, Lisa said something to Stephen, tapped him on his shoulder, stood up and glanced over at me with a smile. I think she said something too, but it was lost in the roar of the engines and propellers. But then Lisa jumped out of the cockpit, ran across the top of the motorised past Stephen and onto the wing. The wind force had her leaning damn near 90 degrees and her skirt was going crazy, but she ran all the way down the ring and then jumped off and landed on my wing, skirt still flapping like crazy, and then ran up my ring back to me. I'm back, she said, and flopped down behind me. When I didn't say anything, Lisa explained. I figured Stephen should have his wings out. I hear that can hurt a lot, so I scattered the pain with them on and got them out for him. I see. Lisa's definition of going for broke was clearly beyond the capacity of my imagination. This gave me courage. George, I can see it, Lisa cried, pointing far across the sky. There were thick clouds covered the ground. The lower end of the clouds had a dull orange glow. They were lit by fire. London was burning. "Let's do this, Lisa. "Yeah." I glanced over at Stephen and he nodded back. I looked forward again, and I could just make out the silhouettes of the fighter planes in the air ahead. The closer we got, the more horrifying the scene became. There were nearly 300 airplanes in the sky above London, all lined up and circling the town, as if drawing a massive magic circle in the air above the city. "I've never seen a battle like this," I muttered. Of course not. We were fighting the dead. Their tactics and strategies would bear no resemblance to those of the living. "I'm going to do what I do. You just fight how you need," Lisa said, putting her hands on my shoulders and standing up. "And like I said before, my skirt will be fine. Don't worry." I looked up and saw her grinning. "Don't you dare die, Lisa, I said. She was going to be my wife. She met my gaze. "I won't die. Don't you dare die either. We'll win here, go home and get married." "I'll hold you to that promise." "Just hold up your end." "I will." As we drew closer, some of the pilots saw us and began shouting. Their formation splintered and 10 planes turned towards us, but we shot past without engaging, just the two of us against this massive force. The more chaos we caused, the better. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba! We dodged fire from multiple machine guns and slammed into the centre of the circle, and several pilots were so surprised by us cutting across their formation, they accidentally turned into the plane next to them, crashing into each other. At least 5 or 6 airplanes exploded and went down all at once. For patched up wrecks, these planes were flying well. They must have zombie engineers to go along with the zombie pilots. I let out a roar, and the zombies responded with their own guttural shrieks, echoing across the sky. "Here I go," Lisa said, and began running up the front of the motorizing. She put one foot on the ring and jumped just as an enemy plane came by. She grabbed its wheels with one hand and was whisked away from me. She must have run head on through the plane. The pilot howled and his body melted away. I circled for a moment, keeping an eye on her, but she scrambled up the side of the plane and slid into the seat, and without even a glance in my direction began firing the guns. Bam, 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 bam! Her first volley took out 3 planes. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Amazing!" I said, but I didn't have time to gawk. Lisa was clearly doing fine. So fine I'd have to kick things up a notch, or I'd wind up as baggage. I couldn't jump from plane to plane like she did, so I'd have to fight with the bullets I had. In other words, I had to aim carefully. So I forced myself to remain calm, move the stick rhythmically, concentrate. Rat-a-tat, boom, rat-a-tat, blam! No matter where I aimed, there were planes. So at first, every bullet I shot sent a zombie spiralling down. But this time, the rotting bodies had been in combat before, and they quickly adapted to my assault. I was sure I'd known the guy who turned to fight me, a Frenchman named Vincent Lecoeur, a Newport 17 with a picture of a dog painted on his belly. That was just his, all right. The Newport had a max speed of 177 kilometers per hour, and he'd made the thing go 200, and even dead his thirst for speed was unabated, and he shot past my plane like a bolt of lightning. But I didn't chase him. I pressed on towards the centre of the magic circle. Rat-a-tat! Rat-a-tat-tat! Each and every time a grossly discoloured flesh bag crossed my sights, I shot them, and the metal box they sat in went down. The planes broke up and the zombies popped out, and as they passed me, every one of them was leaking all over and grinning, eyes rolling the wrong way. Out of the cockpit, they were all just corpses that hadn't died. Shit, I thought. At least try and fight back before you die again. But a group of zombies had seen me and formed a squad and were starting to chase me around. So I also thought, maybe don't try so hard, guys. You're dead. I knew I shouldn't be feeling sympathy for zombies just because they'd been pilot once. I shook off the 4-finger formation with a series of loops and aileron rolls and shot the zombie planes down. I didn't escape unscathed. A storm of bullets from a fleet of Sopwith camels hit the belly of my motorizing. Fuck! I shot the camels down from above, but Vincent Lecour's Newport 17 came at me again and hit my wing dead on. Direct hit. Crack! My ring split down the middle, but as it did, the other motorizing slipped in under me. Stephen! He waved for me to jump down. But, really? But if I stayed where I was, the plane would fall apart around me. Jumping into Stephen's plane was totally impossible, but I flung myself out of the cockpit and put myself at the mercy of the winds. Ah! Ah! As I did, the wing came off completely, and the motorizing shot upwards and away, breaking apart. Stephen's motorizing came up under me, gently catching me in the rear seat. God damn! I yelled, clutching the seat for dear life. I reached between his great right wings and slapped Stephen on the back. Thank you, Stephen. Glad that worked. You're really something, man. It's all I can do to run. But you've done all right at that. Yeah, but I gotta fight a little here. You take the plane. Huh? Look at her. Stephen was, of course, pointing at Lisa Lisa. She was bounding from plane to plane, frying the zombie pilot, then pulling the trigger as long as there were bullets left. Enemy planes going down. Boom, 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 boom. And the next moment she was empty, she'd fling herself at the next plane over. Boing! Hiss! Bam, 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 kaboom! She was a fucking war god. I want the freedom to fight like that, Stephen said. He spread his wings and was off into the airs. I turned around just in time to see him swoop in on the Newport 17 on my tail, yank Vincent out of the cockpit and drop him into thin air. Then Stephen occupied the empty cockpit, pulled out hard and sprayed his machine guns, shooting several other planes down. Crap, he was doing so well I forgot to stop watching. This was a battlefield. I put my game face back on. Watching Lisa Lisa and Stephen fight was like watching ballet. I wrapped my hand around the stick on my second motorising of the day and shouted, "Here I come!" The three of us moved as we pleased for the skies over London, decimating the enemy forces. Dogfight techniques were growing by leaps and bounds every day this war lasted. So there were tons of moves pilots who died didn't get a chance to learn. And it was great fun using all those against them. But even if they were dead, they were still good pilots, and bullets did hit my plane, and Stephen, Lisa had to help me change planes another 4 times. Any time I was in trouble, one of the two would be there instantly. I was totally saved by them. But oh well. The last plane I had was a Fokker E3, one of the few German planes in the fight. I'd shot the German zombie in the head with a pistol, thrown his freshly dead corpse out, and then gone back to fighting a camel that had been on my ass for a while. The camel's pilot was Jim Graham. Judging by the way he was flying, Antonio Torres wasn't inside. He was still hollowed out. Stephen, flying next to me, asked, "Need a hand?" I shook my head. "Nah, I got this. I think," I said. But 20 seconds earlier, he'd shot down another camel I'd been flying. "Damn it, Jim. You're a way better pilot now that you're a zombie. Does being hollowed out make it easier for you to move?" I grabbed the Fokker's stick and yelled, "Let's try this again, Jim!" Jim's camel had been wheeling around as if waiting for me to get ready, but now he came hurtling towards me. I rolled to avoid the bullets and pulled the trigger. The bullets on the Fokker's machine guns timed to fire through the propellers without hitting them. Click. Click. What? They jammed? Shit. I looked front and Jim was grinning at me even though he was a zombie, and I got mad. So as we passed each other, I waggled my wings and hit Jim in the head with the wingtip, decapitating him. Splat! No blood came out of the stump. There was a huge hole in the cross-section, proving he'd been emptied out. There wasn't a single Antonio Torres anywhere in the skies over London. He must be somewhere else entirely, doing something else evil. I looked around and found the skies were quiet. Lisa had blown the last zombie away and brought its plane in diagonally above my Fokker. Then she hopped out of the cockpit. "George!" Yikes! I let go of the stick, held up my arms and caught her in midair. She was doing a very good job keeping that skirt from showing too much, I thought. She gave me a big hug and said, "That was incredible! George, you really have become strong. Look, the 3 of us saved the skies of London." I looked around. The clouds still glowed orange, but there were no more zombies flying. I could hear cheering. From the burning streets of London, I looked down, and the zombies we'd shot down were being chased around by crowds of people. The Hamon warriors had arrived on the ground and were turning zombie after zombie into ash and smoke. "Looks like they're done over there too," Lisa said. I turned to look, and 10 English planes were approaching from the north, flashing their lights in Morse code to prove they weren't more zombies. Lisa could read Morse code, and she translated for me. "Good job taking back London. Thanks." When I saw who sent that signal, I almost wept. It was John Moore. "Sorry we're late. We decided to control the perimeter and keep them trapped in London." "George, should I say they give up too easily?" No, don't." As we passed each other, John and I grinned and held our thumbs up. But when he saw Lisa sitting on my knees, John looked surprised and mimed a whistle. Then Stephen came out from the Fokker's shadow, rings stretched out behind him, and John's eyes nearly popped out of his head. "Seems about right," Stephen said, laughing. That was John Moore Brazabon. I said. He's connected politically. Might be able to parlay you helping save London into a pardon. Stephen shot me a look. I knew you were innocent, but couldn't do a thing to save you. And you make an offer like that back? You're too good for this world. I really didn't care about that. We're war buddies now. We both reached out our hands, and I shook Stephen's hand as we rolled the wind. Thanks, George. Thanks for saving England. Thanks for saving the world. Tears started welling up in his eyes, and I thought he was overstating things. But we did win, and maybe we had saved England, and maybe we had saved the world. The three of us did it together, I said. Thank you, Stephen. And thank you, Lisa Lisa. Her arms still around me, Lisa Lisa closed her eyes, smiled and said not a word. Oh, I thought, this was what she did every day. Save the world. Hamon warriors were sent to every corner of England, and reports came back that no further signs of zombie invasion had been found. But we knew a few thousand, possibly even tens of thousands of Antonio Torres were still hiding somewhere. So the Hamon warriors kept digging, and instituted a national health exam to make sure there were none hiding inside ordinary citizens. Stephen went back to the motorised manor, Lisa Lisa went back to the Hamon warriors, and I went on with the war, and lost a lot of friends, but somehow, boring dicks like William Cardinal stayed alive. Cardinal survived the attack on the Naval Air Force Base by Antonio Torres with nothing worse than a broken leg. I then told everyone he'd ordered me to the fight in London, and was treated like even more of a hero than I was, got himself promoted, and by the time the war ended and the Army and Naval Air Forces had been merged into the English Air Force, he was the supreme commander, never had to go to any dangerous fronts, and got to sit in his damn wheelchair acting like a big shot. But whatever, the war was finally wrapping up. The only good thing about wars was that they ended. So with the war over, I went back to Westwood and the Joestar mansion, and wondered what to do with myself. Flying fighter planes had been a good job, but I'd quite like to get married and have some kids, so maybe a less potentially fatal job would be good, like a pilot on a merchant plane. Maybe take it easy flying passengers around. But John Moore Brazzabon asked me to get involved in politics, and since we'd had a lot of fun doing cars and planes together, I could totally see the appeal of doing something new. But I've been with John for a while now, and I thought that as a man, it was high time I did something on my own, so I kind of wanted to try something else too. I thought about things for a while, and man, Lisa Lisa was sure taking her time coming. What was going on there? I figured she was busy, but Lisa Lisa was never not busy, so that hardly presented a problem. Had she changed her mind? That thought made it feel like something was squeezing all the air out of my heart, so I got real serious about it real fast. What had I done? Ever since the attempted zombie invasion of London, I just continued on with the war against humans. But thinking about it, I remembered the stories my war buddies had told. I was just excuses never seemed to work with girlfriends and wives. Lots of times the thing they were just doing was what caused the strife in the first place, and since they didn't do much of anything besides what they were just doing, it was often the case that their girls wanted them doing something else. It was hard for me to believe that Lisa Lisa disapproved of me going to war and flying planes, so the latter situation was more likely to apply here. All I'd done was the war, so I'd almost certainly failed to do something Lisa Lisa wanted me to do. If Lisa Lisa's been expecting something from me, I was absolutely confident I'd failed to live up to that expectation. I'd seriously done nothing else but the war, and we hadn't even seen each other in 3 whole years. I hadn't called her at all, or even written her a letter. But I mean, we'd always been that way, right? After Lisa Lisa joined the Hamon warriors and went off with Straits, I'd only seen her the night lots of people died in the church on La Palma, in the darkness of the underground shrine in Rome, in jail, and the day we exterminated all the zombies in London. Man, that wasn't nearly enough. Had we really only been together 2 weeks in the last 17 years? Our time in jail was comparatively long, but otherwise we'd only met 4 times. 4? Really? I felt like we'd met and talked and been together a lot more than that, but we really hadn't. It was like we just coincidentally bumped into each other during some crisis or other. Wait, I realised. That's what it was like when we were kids. We only met when I was in trouble. Like I only needed Lisa Lisa when my back was to the wall. And not just that, Lisa Lisa also only met me when she was in a tight spot. Was that enough for both of us then? But I was old enough to know better now. Couples, married or not, didn't last long if they only met when absolutely necessary. It was vital they be together on ordinary days, and spend time together doing nothing in particular. That was what cemented their bonds. Oh shit, I thought. This was bad. We needed a relationship revolution. With that wind in my sails, I decided to go see Lisa Lisa. According to Mum, she was in Switzerland. Nobody looked better backed by snow-covered mountains than I did. All fired off, I dashed off to Switzerland, grabbed Lisa Lisa and yelled, "Damn it, Lisa Lisa! If you don't love me, why'd you say you wanted to marry me?" I had no idea why I'd said it like that. It was a total sulky whine, made me sound as dumb as I was, like a toddler. I planned on being very mature and expressing my desire to date properly, to face our feelings, to strengthen our relationship over time, to take things to another level. And yet, I stood there flapping my lips and uttering strange gasps, unable to say anything else at all, much less correct course. Lisa Lisa stared at me for a moment, then burst out laughing. To my great relief, Lisa Lisa was just as she always was, and seeing that bright smile of hers was all I needed to know I'd been trapped in a metal cage of my own devising. "Don't be ridiculous, George," Lisa Lisa said, exactly as I'd secretly hoped she would. "Why would you ever think I didn't love you? Of course I love you. Can you not tell without seeing me? I'd think you should know that much even when we're apart. Loving you is the foundation of my personality. You know me better than anyone, so I think you know that much too." I did, but I got scared anyway. Then Lisa Lisa said, "Sorry, I'm sure this is because the war ended, but all I'm doing is hammer on warrior work." "Yeah, well, exactly, yes." "I really am sorry," she went on. "I genuinely wanted to go running straight to you, George. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for the war to end." "Sorry, I sound like a little girl, don't I? I'm almost 30. I act more grown up with everyone else. But when I'm with you, George, I feel like we're kids again. And that shows in how I act." I mean, she didn't even look 20 yet, and to my eyes she basically hadn't changed at all since I was 10. But when I hastily tried to tell her this, she said, "But I was just so scared. I mean, Master Tompety went and said something ridiculous about you dying around the time we got married." What? Lisa Lisa had started crying, so I said, "I'm not going to die, Lisa Lisa. I promise I won't. You remember my dad, right? Joestar men don't die and leave their wives or lovers. I won't wind up as just a head though. Me and all parts of me will stay with you." Lisa Lisa flung herself into my arms, nestled her head in my chest and kept on crying, so I got mad. Where was that bald son of a bitch? I was ready to kill him for spouting crap and making Lisa Lisa feel like this. Was there any way to prevent this prophecy from coming true? Seeing red, I dragged a reluctant Lisa Lisa around looking for Tompety, and found him. Face to face, his intimidating aura instantly killed my rage, and I asked with a smile, "Sorry, about this prophecy that I'll die?" Tompety adjusted the layers of eastern gowns he wore. "You'll die? What? You thought you wouldn't?" "Not natural causes, right? I heard some nonsense about me dying right after Lisa Lisa and I got married." "I speak neither lies nor nonsense." "That's right," Lisa Lisa said, wiping her tears. "Tompety would never do that." "Come on, Lisa Lisa, don't you want to fight this thing too?" But I guess saying as much wouldn't do much to fate or destiny, and Lisa Lisa knew full well, and I kinda knew too, that those things could absolutely be foretold by someone properly prophetic. So I guess we had to accept it. But just as my emotions were starting to settle down, Tompety looked puzzled and said, "But maybe you won't die. No, you won't. I don't know. Up to you." "Huh?" We both looked up, surprised. "You have, Tompety said, a god of sorts. Not the god, mind you, but a god. Looking out for you." This again. A god that chose an individual on a whim. Beyond. For the first time in God knows how long, I remembered the words my friend Sukumajuku had said. "And I have a name for this thing guiding me from somewhere not of this world. I call it Beyond." "It seems you're aware of the concept," Tompety said. "Up to you whether to believe in it or not, Jorge Joestar. If you believe in it, you won't die. If you can't put your faith in it, you'll be brutally murdered by something terrifying, as fated." "I believe," I blurted. Sukumajuku had said, "With Beyond at your side, your adventure will be without compare." Tompety's steely eyes softened in a smile. "And I guess you won't die." Was it that easy?" Lisa Lisa looked pretty stunned by this too. "That god may not have made up its mind either. But if you wish to go on living, you must follow that god." Well then, no help for it. I now believed in Beyond. But I wasn't exactly sure how to do this, so I just thought, thanks in advance, and didn't really do anything else about it. Then Lisa and I left Switzerland, went back home, announced our engagement, and started planning the wedding. This church, then a party in the garden at the Joestar mansion, so we'd need drinks and food. And what kind of music should the band play anyway? Lisa and Mom and Penelope went on and on and on and on about that sort of thing. I was relieved to see Penelope enjoying herself. She'd been at odds with Lisa before. Penelope picked up on my relief and explained, "But Lisa's amazing! I can never measure up! I'm glad it's Lisa, really! If it was anyone else, I'd be jealous! But with Lisa, I just can't bring myself to feel that way!" I remember Darlington saying much the same thing. I agreed. Lisa was beautiful and amazing, and I was still laughing about it when I got her pregnant. Crap. But Mom and Penelope were explosively happy. They both let out long, shrill shrieks of joy when they heard Lisa. Lisa was super embarrassed, but also really happy, so I was relieved, but I wondered what Straits would think. "I don't think he'd think anything of it," Lisa said, "and it's still really early, so let's wait a bit, and let him know when things have settled down a bit." Then Lisa and Mom and Penelope redid their whole plan. They considered trying to do it before she showed, but that was deemed too fast, so they decided to have it after the baby was born, and in the end our wedding was moved to the next year. Here comes, guys. Here he comes. With the child being born first, everyone treated Lisa like an absolute queen. Here he is. Old Man Speedwagon sent presents at a shocking rate, one of everything for boys and girls. I let out my first ever happy scream. "Please, calm down," I begged, unable to wipe the grin off my face. "I'll do as I damn well please," Speedwagon said, standing his ground. There he goes, guys. There he goes. Then the baby was born. A boy. We named him Jorge Joestar. That way, he'd be a Jojo too. He inherited Lisa's talents, and even as a baby he defaulted to ham-on breathing. And whenever I tried to change his diaper or hold him, I'd wind up hopping around going bzz, bzz, bzz. When Joseph cried in my arms, electric shocks ran from the top of my head down my left hip and I nearly passed out, but I held fast and acted like nothing was wrong. Of course this was just me and it proved no problem for Lisa, so Lisa gave me a scarf made from the same stuff as hers. The Smurtipologian Beatles thread. It blocked the ham-on and scattered it harmlessly, and now I could wrap Joseph in it to change his diaper, hold him or take him in the bath. Except the water conducted ham-on well, so the Beatles weren't helpful there. Anyway, we set the wedding date late enough that Joseph would be able to hold his head up. Everything was prepared properly, and the only thing left to worry about was the weather. On the morning of November 11th, I was all decked out in my Air Force full-dress uniform when John Moore Brabazon came in, grinning ear to ear in his tuxedo. "So this best man of yours isn't here yet?" he asked. "Huh? Who? Stephen Motorize?" "He did overdo it a bit at the bachelor party last night." "Whatever, don't worry about it. I'll be happy to be the best man in his place." For some reason John was campaigning to be my best man, and frankly it hadn't been an easy choice on my part, but I simply couldn't pick anyone but my first friend in England, my neighbour, and a man who'd saved my life. So to avoid upsetting my bride, I elected to sneak off to the Motorized home to check things out. I let Penelope, the maid of honour, know what was up. "What? Can't someone else do it?" she said, but the Motorized family and I had a history, and since Ben Motorized had reclused himself, William Cardinal had taken over the family affairs, so I could see this being a bit of a problem. John was in fact constantly at odds with William Cardinal, an arrogant man who tended to abuse his power. It would just be faster if I went myself. The Joestar mansion garden had been transformed into a wedding venue, and as I ducked through it I saw Mum holding Joseph. I was pretty sure she saw me, but I ignored that, hopped in my car and headed for the manor. Stephen and Cardinal didn't exactly get along either, and there was a strong possibility Cardinal had forced Stephen to do something just to get at me. Again. I reached the Motorized manor and saw Stephen's car still there. Guess he made it home from the party, last night just fine. He'd been sipping his drinks quietly while my army buddies yucked it up, and he hadn't seemed all that drunk when he said his goodbyes, so I figured he got home alright. I got out of the car and headed for the door, regretting the fact that I was still dressed for the ceremony in my full dress uniform. That smug bastard could be absolutely intolerable with anyone he considered beneath him, and might as well pretend his hand slipped and spilled tea or coffee on my uniform. Well, if he did that to me today, I'd maybe not say anything, but Lisa sure as hell would. I rang the doorbell. Normally Faraday would, without ever running, answer the door in mere moments, but today there was no sign of him. I tried knocking. Still no answer, so I tried the knob, and the door wasn't locked. I opened the door and took a step in. "Hello? Good morning," I called. Still no reply. Weird. Were they out? I didn't find that thought convincing, largely because I could sense someone in the house. Someone? That seemed like the wrong word. What was it? This awful feeling that had swept through me. "Stephen! Hey, Stephen Motorise, it's George!" Should I go to Stephen's room upstairs? But when I set foot on the staircase, I froze in my tracks. The carpet was seeped in blood. This was bad. And the blood wasn't dry at all. In fact, there was steam rising off it. So it was very fresh indeed. There was a thud from somewhere deeper in the manor, and something that sounded like a groan. This wasn't over yet. It was still happening right now. Damn it. I grabbed the poker from the fireplace at the back of the entrance lobby and took a firm grasp on it with both hands. The sound had come from upstairs, to the right from the top of the staircase. Darlington's bedroom was most likely on the right. Stephen's was on the left. But would he have a gun hidden in his room? I didn't know. Fuck it. I ran up the stairs. I put my back to the wall and peeked down the hallway to the right. At the back of the hall stood a girl in pyjamas, her head down, covered in blood. "Darlington!" I said, and stepped out into the hall. But was that Darlington? She was taller and skinnier than Darlington, and her hair hung straight down, no sign of Darlington's meticulous little curls. But I recognised that hair and her figure. The blood-stained girl raised her head when I stepped out into the hall. It was Kenton Motorise, as she'd been when she died 15 years ago. I stopped in my tracks, stunned, and Kenton said, "Blah." She was a zombie. No, perhaps she'd been for quite some time now. Darlington had told me that Stephen and her father had been studying ways to bring back the dead, but Stephen had worked with Lisa and the Hamon warriors, so there was no way he'd ever let Kenton be turned into a zombie. He'd abandoned the idea the first time he encountered real ones. Stephen himself had said that it would be an unforgivable sin to make Kenton into one. Kenton? How? There was no meaning in her utterances, no trace of Kenton's mind left. Mouth hanging open, the zombie flung itself at me, and I jammed the poker in its face without a second's thought. "Sorry. Goodbye, old friend. The girl who taught me planes. I wanted to be like you. I wanted to fly like you did." "Da!" the zombie yelled. The poker came out the back of the zombie's head, and it stopped moving. She was dead again. This wasn't Kenton, I told myself again. And again. I let her frail body slump to the floor. Behind me. "Ah, what the? Jorge Joestar?" said William Cardinal, seated in a wheelchair, a gun pointed at me. This was his fault. Stephen would never make Kenton a zombie. But why would William Cardinal have done it? Simple. Because he was an idiot. Not an ignorant kind of idiot, but the kind that should know better. He'd been attacked by zombies and suffered as a result, but the kind of double-down idiot that idiotically tried to find a way to use zombies again. "You thought you could use Kenton in war, Cardinal?" "Ha ha ha! Any true soldier would think the same." He was also the long-winded type of idiot, so I knew he'd be unable to resist launching into a monologue. So the second he started to boast, I yanked the poker out of Kenton's head, swung it hard and knocked the gun out of his hand. Crack! Shing! The gun hit the wall and slid away across the floor. Cardinal looked surprised and went silent. "Good," I said. "Not another word." "It didn't hurt," he whispered. "Huh?" Well, we both had our adrenaline up, I thought, my mind mostly trying to decide if the army or the police should be called to judge his actions. Or should I do that, right here and now? Then I noticed there was no blood coming out of the cut on his hand and stopped thinking at all. "Huh? A wound this bad should hurt, shouldn't it, Joestar?" Cardinal yelled. He hadn't realised it yet, but he was one too. A zombie. But he was going to work every day as a commander of the Air Force, which necessitated working in the sunlight, so his exterior remained human flesh, which meant, at this point, my legs started quivering. I asked in Spanish, "Why do you hate me so much? What draws such loathing out of you?" Antonio Torres' muffled Spanish echoed from the back of William Cardinal's throat. It's how I get my kicks these days, Bolsa Blanco. Is what I'd like to say, but that's not it at all, nitwit. Who cares about you? I'm just doing what my boss tells me to. Although it's all the more fun when you happen to be involved. All the while there was a squelching, crunching, slurping sound going on, and Cardinal's skin was being pulled and twisted inward. He was clearly being eaten as we spoke, and Antonio's control over Cardinal's body was growing stronger. I started backing down the hallway. As I passed Kenton's body, the door to the room was open, and inside I saw half-eaten bits of Stephen, and Ben, and Darlington, but they weren't lying still but twitching and pulsing. They were getting ready to rise again as zombies. My friends. You're a soldier! You know the boss's orders are absolute, right? Antonio said, belching. Today's your last day, Jorge Joestar. All that's left is for you to die. Antonio pushed the chair's wheels forward with both hands, still wearing Cardinal. I kept backing up, but soon ran out of hall to back up into. I can't afford to die, I said. I was getting married today, not dying. You will die, Antonio said. It's already decided. My boss said it was your destiny. You keep going on about this boss. Who is it? Anyone a shitbag like you would follow can't be worth much. How dare you insult the boss? Antonio warned. A fucking insect like you has no right. I grinned. Big talk considering how many of you I shot down in my plane. We aren't kids anymore, Antonio. I'm done putting up with your shit, you fucking midget. You think you can beat me just because I'm not flying a plane? I do, asshole. No way I'm losing barehanded! Antonio tried to stand Cardinal up, but Cardinal had been in that wheelchair so long he didn't have the muscles left, and he just collapsed in a heap on the floor, and then slapped both hands down hard, flinging himself bodily into the air, caught the light fixture and dangled from it. Zombies sure were strong. Meanwhile I had a poker. Was that enough? Cardinal's flesh looked pretty firm. How deep would this poker really pierce? I might be at a bit of a disadvantage here. But I had a bride waiting for me. The ribbons were in the way, so I tossed my uniform aside, took a firm grip on the poker and got ready. Just facing up to Antonio Torres was enough to make tears well up. My legs were shaking. I was the one still dragging our childhoods around with me. Damn it! Come on, Antonio Torres! You bullied me every damn day. About time I got a turn. Trying to sound tough! Antonio sniggered, swigging from the lights fixture. Lisa's not going to save you. Just watch. Antonio jerked Cardinal's chin, pointing at the window. In the sky outside was another Antonio Torres, gliding like a flying squirrel. 2 of them. 3. No, even more. Close to the window I could tell. A flock of flying squirrel Antonios was coming in from the coast. You know how many there are? Antonio asked. 1 flat-ass zombie's as good as another. Antonio ignored this. About 920,000. 920,000? I gaped at him, but Antonio had been dead for 20 years, and if he'd been shedding to double his numbers every year, no matter how many of him we'd killed in the war, he'd end up with that many. We've got all of England surrounded now! Today's the day! Our boss is taking over this entire country! Our boss promised me I can have Lisa. I'll be inside her next. I can eat her slowly from within. I'll leave her brain for last, so she can say they're having her blood drained, her organs chewed and her bones crunched. I can't wait! Desperate to shut him up, I swung the poker wildly, but all it did was make Cardinal's bald skull about half the size. He was already dead, so this failed to kill him again. No use! Antonio said. The boss said your death is set! Just accept it! I'm not dying! I yelled and swung the poker again. Antonio caught it mid-swing and shouted, It's your fault Dar died! But in Cardinal's voice. I looked again, and Cardinal's jaw was hanging open, his tongue out, but his face was toned like a living human, and the light was back in his eyes. Jorge Joestar, it's all your fault! You brought death here! You jinxed! Cursing me, Cardinal began swinging his arm wildly, still clutching the other end of my poker. I was flung through the air, and when it hit the floor, I no longer had a weapon in my hand. Now it's over. Jorge! Antonio's voice returned, laughing. Honestly, I never thought the day would come that I would kill you. I'd have laughed if you died, but I just like seeing you cry and run when you saw me coming. I never really considered actually killing you. But what will be. This was our fate all along. It was decided long ago. Antonio swung Cardinal's fist and sent me flying. Wham! I hit my head hard on the opposite wall and nearly passed out. For a brief moment I wondered if maybe I'd be better off if I did pass out here. Wouldn't that be easier? But I shook that thought off. I had Lisa and Joseph waiting for me. My friends and family, all gathered together in my home. I'd followed the rules of the Church of England and had my banns read out 3 times. Now the big day was finally here. I had to get back to it. Well? Thrack! Antonio hit me in the side of the head with the poker he'd stolen from me. My head throbbed, but I ignored it, thinking furiously. Resist! Come on! Jorge! I thought you wanted to fight me. Wasn't this your turn? Thrack! Cardinal struck me across the back where I lay. But I just kept thinking, didn't respond at all. There was no way I'd win this in a straight-up fist fight. And the excitement of the fight would stop me thinking at all. No point in fighting to lose. Think, how could I survive this? Normally Lisa would show up, but she wouldn't make it in time today. It was the busiest day for a bride. At this rate, I would clearly be dead soon. If I lay here waiting for Lisa to come running in her wedding dress, I'd die. No, I couldn't leave this in her hands. I had to cast out the urge to just wait for her to save me. Don't make it Lisa's job to save your life. But what could I do? I was already half dead. Come on! This is boring. God, you're pathetic, Jorge! Antonio howled. Can't you at least go out like a man? Or you're gonna die like this? I'm not going to die. But why was I still so convinced of that? Because I thought Supercut was just gonna magically appear out of nowhere and save me again? I did. I mean, he'd said that we'd meet again one more time. Cool. Then could that be now? Come on. But he didn't. Of course not. There was no sign of him coming at all. No sign. 15 years ago, when Supercut showed himself at the motorized manor, there'd been no signs of him coming. So why had he come? He'd said, I'm here to help you. He'd been there for me. He'd come if I needed him. Fuck it! Then die! Your entire life was a waste. It was a waste of my time ever dealing with someone like you. You're such a worthless, pathetic fool that your very existence ruins the lives of everyone around you. You should never have been born! Supercut had also said this. Your beyond is making it happen. Right, he talked like that a lot, about the power I had. I'd completely forgotten about it again. But I remembered now. I had some sort of god on my side. Believe in beyond and you will overcome your fate. I remembered something else now. The prophecy about me dying. Lisa's fears had come to pass. I had imagined it would actually be the day of. But anyway, I was destined to die here. But Tom Petty had said something else. I don't know. Up to you. That's right. This was up to me. That god may not have made up its mind either. But if you wish to go on living, you must follow that god. There was no other way. If I was to survive this, I had to put my faith in this beyond. Okay, let's believe. With my head all woozy from the hail of poker fracks, Antonio was unleashing on it. Ha! You're this pointless without an airplane? Do you even have a cock? Been a while, but let's find out. Antonio moved Cardinal's head and pulled my trousers and underwear off, but I just let him. I couldn't afford to waste energy resisting. Think, what did believing in beyond entail? It meant there was an author writing a story, with me as the main character. Then come on and save me, I thought, but I know there was a reason why they couldn't. Once Supercut had vanished and I was all alone, I'd read a lot of novels, so I knew. Stories had plots, they had narrative flow, and you couldn't have things that didn't make sense or just showed up out of the blue. I had to create the flow. Beyond existed. That's why Supercut had come 15 years ago. He'd come even though I didn't believe in Beyond at the time because I thought about that for a minute and decided it was to convince me that Beyond existed and at the same time teach me how to use Beyond. God damn! Your ass is pale! Watch it bounce! Antonio yelled, hitting me so hard with the poker half my cheek was torn off. Just how soft is it? What's it made of? Gelatin? Look at it wobble! If I used Beyond, Tsukumajuku would come. What I needed was a way to use it. Think. What narrative would allow him to come? I remembered the last thing he'd said to me. The nature of my name suggests that we'll meet again, one more time. Right. His name? Come to think of it, 15 years ago he'd said some nonsense about his name. Tsukumajuku. Tsukumajuku is 910-910-9. My name has 3 all-powerful gods linked together by 2 crosses. The name of God. Right, because he had the name of God, he'd come for me again. But why did he put it like that? What was there to his name? There must be something. There must be a meaning to that all-powerful God and cross. I remembered that I'd borrowed a Japanese dictionary from Tsukumajuku once and flipped through it a bit. Ha! Show me your cock! What the... That ain't your cock! What the hell? Grown-up cocks are gross! That's disgusting! I'm gonna puke! Antonio shrieked, and warm vomit splattered down on my exposed crotch, chewed up bits of William Cardinal's insides. Japanese characters don't just symbolise sounds, they also show meaning, and there's breadth to that meaning. This breadth is why the kanji for 9 could also mean omnipotent God, and why the kanji for 10 could also be a cross. The shape of the kanji was a metaphorical symbol. In Japanese, you could manipulate that meaning to convey that one thing was another, force open a path and allow meaning to pass down it. So back to Tsukumajuku. Him giving me that dictionary when he left felt like the work of Beyond to me. It let me understand. I was extremely glad I'd learned just how broad the meaning of Japanese words could be. Japanese used kanji. Kanji had several different meanings. The kanji for 9 had 3 meanings: kyu, kakono, and ku. The kanji for 10 had 5: ji, ju, shu, tu, and tu. Kakono and tu sounded like here and far. Here, far, here, far, here. A name that started here, went far away twice, and then came back. Shit! Your dick made me throw up! Antonio yelled and raised the poker, but I'd made it in time. I'd been trying to focus on thinking, but I'd been panicking on the inside. Fortunately, I'd done it. He went far away and came back twice. After he vanished in America, he'd come back once in a motorized manner and vanished again. So he'd come back once more. Here. That's right. And there he was, still 15 years old, standing by my side and looking down at me. At last you decided to believe in Beyond, George, Tsukumajuku said. It took you getting this bloody? You sure are a troublesome protagonist. He bent down and took my shoulders. What? Antonio said. Tsukumajuku Kaito! Why are you still young? He attacked, but his swing met only air. Eh? I said. We're not going back to the wedding? Tsukumajuku looked sorry. You've got another role to play, but don't worry, it's a role you're beyond prepared for you, although that doesn't guarantee it'll lead to a happy ending. Then what's the point? Don't worry, you'll find the meaning yourself. Oh, come on! So, where are we? Tsukumajuku and I were standing in some foreign land, not anywhere in Europe. I could see a cluster of houses in the distance that were nice looking, sturdily constructed, but not anything you'd see in Europe. The green crops growing in square-cut, farm-like plots of mud were clearly not wheat. This is Japan, Tsukumajuku said, a country town called Morio, although at the moment it's floating upside down in the Pacific. I had no idea what that last bit meant, but the rest came as quite a surprise. Japanese? Why are we here? Because your role is to be played here. Wow, Japan. It's a beautiful country. Thank you. I believe you're here to solve a mystery. Huh? What kind? Murder. I'm the victim. It's all yours, buddy. Huh? What? Meeting you and being your friend has been an honour. I'm proud of you, Jorge Joestar. The world to come is in your hands. And with that, Tsukumajuku vanished into thin air, or I woke from a waking dream. I wasn't sure which. Either way, the instant he was gone, the brightly lit Morio landscape went black as pitch, and I found myself lying on a cold night road, with neither stars nor moon in the sky above. My body was covered in blood from the beating Antonio Torres gave me. My skull was fractured and chunks of flesh had been torn from my back and ass. I was in a hell of a state. Barely alive, but alive. Antonio and his cardinal suit were killed by Lisa Lisa once she arrived. Kenton and the other zombies had been abducting and eating neighbours, and the house was filled with leftover bits of flesh and blood, and they found my uniform torn to pieces, so they were all convinced I died. Lisa Lisa cried. But not just Lisa Lisa. Penelope was crying too, and furious. So when 920,000 Antonios surrounded Great Britain, Penelope unleashed her fury and created a locked room. The locked room was made from the flying squirrel Antonios hovering over the bluffs, and a giant wall made from torn up bits of them surrounded the whole of Great Britain. "How dare you! You'll pay for this! I swear it!" Penelope screamed, her rage targeting the entire world. It may have looked like the wall made of Antonio was surrounding England, but it wasn't. Penelope had made a locked room that surrounded all of the world that wasn't England. The 920,000 Antonios that Penelope fused into a giant wall began to gobble up the world. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14. Desolation Row. The journey from Mars complete. All we had left to do was calculate the trajectory and land in the water, and I'd figured since we were landing smack in the middle of the ocean we'd be totally fine. But Morio was waiting for us and we slammed straight into Arrow Cross, so whoops, too bad, we're all dead. Or so I thought. But when I woke up I was there, alive, and Arancha and Poochie were waking up too, looking surprised they both survived, and I could tell the stuff around us wasn't the spaceship but cars turning into a sphere. Like a small version of the eyed balloon. Cars made a tear in the round walls, and we stepped out, and it was either dusk or dawn, because it was chilly and dimly lit, and there were stars and a moon in the sky. About half the sky was bright and half was dark. I looked for the North Star. I found Cassiopeia and the Big Dipper, and then the North Star. The bright half of the sky was west, so this must be evening. Under the starry sky was an unfamiliar countryside, hilly but no mountains, like Morio but not the same. Wheat fields, not rice paddies. The houses I could see in the distance weren't Japanese style, but brick and stone like old European landscapes. Then a gust of wind blew by, and I caught a whiff of something sweet and turned around. Remnants of the spaceship were stuck to the outside of the car sphere, and Kars's flesh was melting, smoke rising off it, making a bubbling noise. And the smell wasn't that of animal flesh burning, but weirdly sweet, like fruit. "Kars, you okay there?" I asked, and Kars slowly returned to humanoid form, but had clearly taken quite a bit of damage. He wasn't steady on his feet.
"The extra me's covering the ship burned up just above the surface,"
he said hoarsely.
"Seems like we were 1 me short."
But he couldn't exactly have just rated one more loop and obtained another extra Kars. In this universe, he'd met Funny at Valentine, so even as the universe looped itself, there are things that happened every time and things that didn't. "No, 36 should have been enough," Enrico Pucci unilaterally declared. Don't think the number 36 would just work everywhere forever, I thought, but Pucci was lost in thought and didn't even glance my way. Then I realised. Pucci was hung up on the idea of 36 souls. I could hear him muttering to himself. "It wouldn't have worked without 36. 36 is 12 by 3. 12 and 3 are both holy numbers in Christianity." The cold in the way to heaven had clearly possessed Pucci. "Have the courage to cast aside your stand, and as your stand withers it will gather 36 souls and give birth to something new. It will befriend he who says the 14 words. The place is 28.24 degrees north, 80.36 degrees west." As far as the first phrase went, the only part of that had happened was the number 36. 36 cars were assembled, but that wasn't because anyone had thrown away a stand. The ultimate thing had simply survived the death of the universe 36 times, and nothing new had been born. As far as the 14 words, these did seem to be lining up. Spiral staircase, rhinoceros beetle, desolation row, fig tart, rhinoceros beetle, Via Dolorosa, rhinoceros beetle, singularity, Giotto, angel, hydrangea, rhinoceros beetle, singularity, secret emperor. From this list, Poochie had clearly chosen to interpret Morio and Nero Nero Island as moving as rhinoceros beetles, and that made sense to me. They seemed to have pretty burly legs, and though they'd split open, they'd started out with those barriers on their back, armoured. But if the phrase rhinoceros beetle showed up 4 times, were there 2 other moving islands out there? I was also on board with calling our falling on the Arrow Cross house Via Dolorosa, and because we'd fallen there we were still alive, I guess. Jojo was clearly the probes Cars had made a chip out of. Otherwise, I went back through events and understood why Poochie had reacted to what Cars said. Cars had described the Earth as a water vessel, which was the etymology of the word hydrangea. 28.24 degrees north, 80.36 degrees west was the location on Mars where we found Cars. So considering all these symbols, it made sense that the raid to heaven involved making friends with Cars. But did it really? The ultimate thing viewed us as food, so could we be friends? I couldn't imagine it, and the scale of his every action was petrifying, but he had protected us from burning up on re-entry. The idea was only just starting to settle in, since I hadn't expected him to do anything like that, but saving us had come at no small sacrifice. He was standing bolt upright, his legs slightly apart, and the burns covering his body were visibly healing. A pus was squirting out of the wounds with an oozing popping noise, and when it hit the ground it sizzled and evaporated. Yikes, that looks painful. Anything we can do? I asked, but he ignored me. Clearly there was nothing I could do. But I said, thanks for saving us anyway. Oh yeah, Naranchi said. You saved our asses. Thanks, dude. But why'd you save us? Focused on healing himself, Cars didn't deign to respond. Yo, Naranchi said, turning to me. Maybe we should run for it right now. Seems like he ain't moving. 1? Where to? Where Bucciolati is. Naranchi, look around you. This isn't Morio or Nero Nero Island. Huh? He spun around, flustered. Huh? Seriously? Where the fuck are we? I don't know. But we fell right on top of Morio and Nero Nero Island. I saw them. Yeah, so did I. Specifically, we'd fallen right on top of the Arrow Cross house. So what had happened? Where had we ended up this time? Narancha dropped a few hundred tiny dust boots on the grass and sent them out in all directions to scout, which reminded me that I was still borrowing a dust boot from Cars, so I did the same thing. Unlike Mars, there's trees and grass. So nice. I love Earth, Narancha crowed. He had a point. The sky above us was the same sunset I'd seen all my life. The moon was bright, the stars were twinkling, and the countryside around us might be unfamiliar, but was comfortingly real. We could breathe without spacesuits, and the gravity didn't make our movements heavy or light. This was Earth. So what about it was bugging me so much? I'm going in the houses, but there's nobody there, Narancha said, peering into his headset periscope. Every house is empty. What the? Oh, a town sign. Is this English? West? Let me see, I said, and kind of snatched the periscope off Narancha. There was a dirt road that covered a grassy creek via a stone bridge, and right in front of it was a wooden sign painted green that read Wastewood. Wastewood? Well, that does sound like English. Is this America somewhere? But American countryside didn't look like this. America would have paved roads so the cars could drive easier. The rivers would have flood control. The bridges would be concrete, or at least have guardrails. But I saw no signs of any government work like that. Were we just that deep in the country? But did anywhere still look like this these days? There were wheat fields and homes. If people used the roads, they'd have to pave them so cars could use them. But as I looked through the periscope, I figured out the reason. One dust boot found a large manor and entered the grounds. There was indeed a car sitting in the driveway, but it was a classic car, like in a Sherlock Holmes movie. Like they'd taken the horses off a carriage and added 4 small tyres. It matched the styling on the old manor, but it looked well used for something a hobbyist kept. Like someone had just dumped it there. I got close, and this went beyond poorly maintained. It looked to have been straight up abandoned there at the mercy of the elements. The entire body was covered in a thick layer of dust. I couldn't even see in through the square windows. But it didn't look like it could have been left there a century ago either. Can't find anybody, Naranchi said, looking at the periscope over my shoulder. Yeah, but it doesn't seem like the place was abandoned 100 years or anything. 100 years? Look, see? I showed him a view from a different dust boot, one that was looking into a small shop. It was a general store, and the packaging on everything was antique. And there were newspapers on sale by the door. The dust boot was parked next to them, close in on the title and date. The Daily Mirror, November 11th, 1920. That was 92 years ago, Were these really for sale? But the paper looked real, and so did everything else in the shop. There was a reality to the details. Whoa, Naranja said. 1920? How many years ago was that? It's 2012, so 20 minus 12 equals 8. 20 minus 19, 1. 18 years ago! Before I was born? One should not become a gangster so young, I thought. 92 years ago. Fuck how! Naranja flew into a rage, but I was used to it by now. I ignored him and began checking other dust boots. There were dust boots riding fish and birds, and I saw a lot of animals besides humans. They all seemed to be doing just fine. Only the humans had gone missing. One riding, I guess, a butterfly? I could see big white wings flapping on the sides of the screen, and it was bobbing up and down in the air as it flew. Anyway, it went in through the window of a hole. Old Art Deco-style furniture and dishes on the table, like they'd been eating a moment ago. Breakfast. They'd been eating a simple meal of bread and soup and coffee, but the people eating here had been left more than a few minutes ago. These dishes had to have been here at least a month. The bread in the basket was almost all eaten by bugs. Soup had dried in the bowls, the half-boiled vegetables rotting. The inside of the coffee cups was stained pitch black. What could have happened that caused the people living here to leave their dishes on the name and never come back? The butterfly the dust boot was riding fluttered further into the house when Naranja said, "Hey, George! Your name's Jorge Joestar, right?" "Yes." "Why?" "Congratulations." "What for?" "Look." I peered over at Naranja's screen and saw a huge garden outside a large manor with rows of tables and chairs. White ribbons and crosses hung everywhere. Also quite a lot of what had once been flowers. There were glasses and bottles on the tables, like they'd been left there, not after the party, but based on how little of the wine had been drunk since before the party began. Beyond the tables was a white carpet running down the centre, with rows of chairs lined up on either side, and an altar at the front. This was obviously a wedding venue, a wedding that had never taken place. In the dim evening night, the abandoned party setup looked deeply forlorn. Near the garden entrance was some sort of welcome board, and as the bird dust boot was riding past by it, I had just enough time to read it. It read, "Welcome to the wedding reception for Jorge Joestar and Elizabeth Straits." Heh, see? Something to look forward to, huh? While Naranja yucked it up, I remembered something. In my world, there is another Jorge Joestar. That George spelled his name the same way I preferred, so I figured right away that this was the Jorge Joestar Tsukumajuku had talked about. Tsukumajuku had come from 1904, from a world with a weird old map. So was this La Palma? No, the Canary Islands were Spanish, so I doubt there was anywhere named Westward there, and the English-only welcome board made little sense either. Since this other Jorge Joestar was a pure-bred Englishman, perhaps this was England. As I thought, the bird dust boot was riding flew away from the house out of the front gate, and I saw a postbox outside. There was a name written on it, Joestar. This must be Jorge Joestar's family home, and he'd been planning to get married in the garden. So perhaps there were more things belonging to this other George inside the house. I wasn't sure what checking those out would tell us, but I was curious. Naranja, I'd like to head to this Jorge Joestar's house. Huh? Fuck yeah, let's do this! Ain't accomplishing shit just standing around here. I turned towards Cars. Behind him, Poochie seemed to have just become aware of his surroundings. Where is this? What happened? We aren't sure yet, I said, but it's possible we've gone back in time. Speed is a big factor in time travel, so maybe the ship's falling speed was a little too fast. As I said it, I remembered that the speed required would be close to light speed, and the air resistance on re-entry would be so great we'd never get anywhere close to that. Our speed was slow enough we'd have landed safely if we'd touched down in the ocean. So what had happened? I wondered if Cars had used some power, but guessing out loud wasn't going to get us anywhere. Anyway, if we've time travelled, it's 1920, and we appear to be in England, in a town called Wastwood. I waited to see if we reacted to all of this. After all, England was a myth, and was not supposed to actually exist. But Poochie just nodded. I see. Then we should head for the capital, England, London. Why? Something waits for us in Desolation Row, Poochie said, with great but unsubstantiated conviction. London? I still wasn't sure the place actually existed, but we definitely needed to start moving either way. We'd definitely fallen on Morio, but instead we found ourselves wherever this Wastewood was. There was an entrance in Morio, and the exit lay here. If we found that exit, maybe we could get back. Naranja interrupted this chain of thought. Huh? Found someone. He was staring at my screen, so I took a look, and a butterfly from earlier had fluttered into a storehouse or closet or basement or, I don't know, a dark room of some sorts, and in the centre of it stood 3 people. They were all men and looked pretty beat up. There were rips in their old-fashioned shirts and pants, and one's entire ass was exposed. The 3 of them were standing stock still in the centre of the room, their faces very close together. Were they discussing something secret? But as the butterfly got closer, I could tell. It wasn't 3 men, but 3 men and a little girl, about 5 years old, and the 3 strong men all had their teeth sunk in her neck, leaving the rest of her dangling in the air, hiding her until we were right up close. "What in the name of fuck?" Narancia yelped. I was pretty shocked myself. All 3 men had their eyes closed, but the man on the right swallowed, and the other 2 men twitched and tried to pull the girl towards them. The man who'd swallowed wasn't about to give her up and pulled back. Since all 3 men were fighting to sink their teeth in her neck, I got a good look at them. Their mouths were filled with fangs, sunk deep into the body of the little girl. 3 men were fighting to eat this kid. Another one swallowed, so it seemed safe to assume they were drinking her blood. But they weren't just gulping away, so perhaps the 3 of them were taking their time, not wanting to waste her. After all, there was nobody else in town. "Shit! Load up!" Narancia yelled. "Fire! Shoot 'em!" Pew, pew! 3 cruise missiles shot out of the dust boot, levelled out and hit each of the men in the head. Frack, frack, frack! Their heads split open, but no blood or brains came out. The girl fell to the ground in the middle, and looked for all the world like she was already dead. But Shiobana had said that the dead were biting people, and that they were attacking other humans. No way, I thought, and a moment later, the girl stood up, her eyes showing only whites. Her little mouth opened wide enough her cheeks split, showing an awful lot of fangs. "What the? That's not a human!" Narancia shrieked. "It's a zombie," I said. "A zombie?" "Narancia, shoot the kid." "Huh? I can't do that." "Then Narancia, bring your dust boots back here." Quick!" I just cottoned on to our surroundings. There were figures standing in the wheat fields around us. All I could make out was their silhouettes in the darkness, but they were shaped like people. But they didn't feel like people. Things that looked human but weren't were staring at us. We were already surrounded. "Hurry!" I hissed, but I guess they heard me, because the shadows around us all started closing in, and we could soon see the drool running down their cheeks, the nasty bared fangs. "The dead are walking," Poochie said. "The end of the world draws nigh." Brushing off his dire words, I called back my dust boots and let out a hail of missiles roaring into the explosions. Zombie after zombie exploded. Narancia's dust boots joined us, and we took out nearly all the zombies, but 2 made it back through the fields and were right on top of us. "Ah! Ah! Ah!" Horrible groans and horrible fangs, and our missiles weren't going to be in time, but just before they got us, Poochie's white snake punched each one in the head so hard it split open. "The end of the world is but the prelude to the arrival of heaven," Poochie said. That was ominous. More zombies were gathering. Narancia gathered his dust boots and formed the big one, and we climbed in. Cars were still looming in place, emitting smoke, and when I suggested we get him on board, Narancia looked reluctant, but Poochie insisted. "We need all elements gathered so far. We can't afford to leave anything behind." This astronaut was sounding more and more like a prophet, but apparently saying things with no discernible basis but oodles of confidence was the trick to overruling Narancia, like he assumed there must be some reason beyond his comprehension or no one would act like that, and just went along with it. The boy had no faith in his own ability to think through things or work things out, and thus was easily dragged into the flow of forceful personalities. So I put my own oar in too. For the same reason, we need to check out this Joestar manor. At this, not just Poochie, but Kaz, who'd been so busy healing he hadn't even adjusted his gaze all this while, turned and looked at me.
Joestar Manor.
Huh? Uh-oh, I thought, but I soon switched to "oh well" instead. I was feeling much the same way as Poochie was. Everything has meaning. Narancia's dust boot took us through a meadow and some woods before we reached the Joestar Manor. I hopped out of the sub and checked the mailbox. This was definitely the Joestar home. Then we sailed into the garden, knocking tables and chairs aside, did a circuit of the main building, parked outside the entrance, and I hopped out again, went up on the porch, and peered inside through the window nearest the front door. I was super careful while peeping, worried that there were a bunch of vampiric zombies clustered inside. The lofty entrance was empty, but I thought I saw someone moving down the back hallway. I reached my hand out to the door and knocked, but there was no response. "Hello?" I called, softly but aloud. No reply. I sensed someone behind me, Naranch I figured, and turned around to receive quite a shock. The figure behind me had its face painted white, green stars around its eyes, larger lips painted over its actual lips, and brightly coloured clothes. It was a clown. "Oh, you!" the clown shrieked in high-pitched English. As it did, there was a huge racket as the front porch came apart like a tornado struck it, but instead of falling, the bits combined in mid-air, forming a wall leading to the porch roof. Beyond the porch wreckage wall, I could hear Narancha screaming, "George! What are you doing? Run!" I was too surprised by the clown to react in time, and the walls were already closed around me, locked in here, in the dark, face to face with a clown. Narancha started trying to break down the walls imprisoning me, and I gave it a kick or two, and tried ripping bits of wood off with my hands, but I didn't get anywhere. In fact, I could no longer reach the walls. Before I knew it, a rope made of the same wood bits as the walls had dropped down from the ceiling, wrapped itself round my neck, pulled tight, and was pulling at me, trying to drag me off the floor and strangle me. The clown laughed. "If you're not Penelope's friend, you have to hang yourself." Penelope? A girl's name? A clown? A locked room? The noose on my neck pulled me high enough off the ground my feet wouldn't reach the floor, and was getting very tight round my throat, but those two key words jogged my memory. "Stop! I'm not the locked room, maestro!" I yelled. The clown took a close look at my face. "Thought so. Xavier Cortez is dead!" The Spanish police on La Palma beat him to death with their nightsticks and sank his body into the sea at night. It was like the soul left the clown's body. His whole body went stiff, then began to spin faster and faster until it exploded, and the walls around me and the rope on my neck went with it. The floor of the porch collapsed. As I sat there coughing, I heard footsteps come running. The front door was flung open, and a Latin beauty came out. "George!" she said, looking around, and without thinking I said, "Here!" But when her gaze found me, she looked very perplexed. "Nice to meet you," I said. "My name's Jorge Joestar." "Don't be ridiculous," she said, fixing me with a furious glare. She was clearly looking for the other George, Sukumajuku's friend. "I'm not, I swear. Penelope, right?" She'd been the one controlling that clown then. I took my wallet out of my back pocket, pulled out a business card and handed it to her. My name was written on it, and not using the spelling on my passport or other official documents. Jorge Joestar, detective. "What do you mean, detective? Are you a cop?" "I'm a private detective," I said. "The kind that inevitably ends up solving the mystery." What are you talking about?" "Have you not read Sherlock Holmes? Was this the real England? Had Conan Doyle not made the place up after all?" "Oh, but what? You're a Chinaman, aren't you?" "Japanese, but I'm an English citizen." "Japan? Oh, are you friends with Sukumajuku then?" At the mention of his name, every cell in my body shivered. I knew it. There was the world Sukumajuku had come from, and after Sukumajuku had left, something very strange had happened on this island. "I am," I said. "By the way, what in the hell is happening here? I mean, are you okay? Are you the only one here? Alive, I mean." As I was asking, Naranchi yelled over me, "Hey, George! Who is she?" in Italian, and Penelope's attitude changed dramatically. "I'm the only one here. I've no idea what's happening. You need not concern yourself with me. Please leave." And with that, she tried to shut the door. Clearly, she didn't want to invite strangers in, but from behind her came a gentle voice. "Penelope." A woman stepped into view, and the moment I saw her, it felt as if the air around me had grown thin, and yet a strange warmth swept over me at the same time. Physics suggested if the air pressure dropped, so would the temperature, and yet... Wait, that was irrelevant. Anyway, this woman was about 40 years old, beautiful, and possessed of the sort of sincerity that ensured you'd feel horribly guilty if you ever betrayed or tricked her. A sort of solemnity that instantly stressed me out, but at the same time made you feel that if she was handling things, everything would work out just fine in the end. "Erina," Penelope said. "Let me greet our guests at least," Erina replied. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Erina Joestar. You're Jorge Joestar?" She was just standing in front of me, but her class and elegance had me breathless. I took far too long to answer. Yes." "You seem awfully young. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?" 16. Would you perhaps be Japanese? Yes. Sorry, I keep stammering. I'm not usually this nervous meeting people. That's quite all right. Please be at ease. No, even your gentle truckles are bowling me over here. No way I can relax. Behind me, Narancia is growing irritated. Dude, stop fucking round! You learn anything from him yet? God, he was rude. I went bright red. Your companion's certainly a lively one, Erina said, glancing over my shoulder. Who the fuck is this granny? It's fuck dangerous round here. You bringing her with us or not? Make up your fucking mind. God damn it, Narancia, shut up, I yelled, reeling around. And there were 3 zombies running up behind him that he hadn't noticed. Look out, I began, but before I got the words out, snap, 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 3 phone booth-sized boxes popped up and swallowed the zombie. These boxes were made from the dirt or grass in the yard, just like the locked room that had swallowed me was made from the front porch. I caught Penelope's eye, and she just sniffed huffily. Scary, but a little bit cute. These grounds are completely safe, but those things do keep trying. By those things she must mean the zombies, but just what was happening inside those boxes? Was a clown appearing inside each of them to hang the zombies? I glanced round, and there were several other booths dotted round the garden, some fully intact, others crumbling, with holes in them, or only the bottom of the walls remaining. Through the holes I could see what lay inside, and there was a zombie hanging from a noose, but there was nothing below the zombie's neck. Penelope saw me looking and said, They struggle after being hung, so they rip their own heads off. No sooner were the words out of her mouth than 3 splats came from the new booths. Yikes! Narancia yelped. See? But I prefer Erina didn't see that sort of thing. Would you please go now? Such weird clothes. I looked back at Erina. Excuse me, how did you know I was Japanese? I've been running a trading company for some time now. I've done business with Japanese people in the past, based on the inflections in your English and perhaps your facial features. You have a soft smile that's very particular to Japanese culture. I do? I mean, I guess people do say I look like an idiot. She chuckled. And I knew a boy about your age. I believe he called himself a detective as well. Yeah, I assume you mean Tsukumajuku? Yes, he was friends with my son, perhaps his only friend at the time, so they were always together in middle school. We lived in the Canary Islands then, but that boy had to return to Japan quite suddenly, and my son was already quite upset by that when we learned that his ship had capsized. We kept the news from him for a while, but if you know Tsukumajuku, then did he not die at all? Well, not in the ship crash. No. Where are you from? How should I answer that? From Morio? From Mars? Tsukumajuku had family in Japanese Fuku Prefecture in a small town called Nishiakatsuki. I lived there too. It's quite far away, but I met Tsukumajuku there, and quite a lot happened, and now I'm here. Really, a lot had happened. Quite a lot? Erina echoed. Perhaps she picked up on the scale of things, though I doubted she could have known the full measure. Yeah. But you did not arrive here by ordinary means. No, we didn't. I'm sorry I forgot to ask, but how is it that the dead come to walk around attacking the living? We still don't know the reason, but I suppose that's for me and you and your friends to figure out. Jorge Joestar, do you believe in destiny? Erina asked, looking me right in the eye. Yes, I said, unable to suppress a smile at what I was about to say. I not only believe in destiny, I make a living from doing so. Anyone calling themselves a detective did. Erina gave me that lovely laugh of hers again. Well said, Jorge Joestar from very far away. I'm glad we met. Yeah. Sorry, I'm... Ugh. Excuse me, Penelope said. Yes? I asked. Where are you going and what are you going to do there? Huh? Well, apparently this is England, so we're talking about going to London. What for? I'm not really sure, but we're looking for a Desolation Row. Kinda seems like anyone still living will have fled London too. Desolation Row? Yes. Why are you looking for that? Why worry? I wasn't sure. Maybe just the narrative flow led us to it. I laughed at the idea. We were finding Poochie's metaphors one after another and using them to guide us. I couldn't offer any other explanation for our situation, and I couldn't help but laugh at that. We're looking for the way to heaven. The way to heaven? Erina said. I was surprised by her surprise. I wondered if this mess with all the zombies made that line sound like suicide. No, I'm sure it's nothing all that serious, I said, trying to cover. Well, I know this is coming out of the blue, Penelope said, but can I come with you? You come from far away, right? I can protect you, I'm sure. Erina, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I go? My clowns will still protect the manor even if I'm gone, and I'll come back as fast as I can. Huh? But zombies weren't that big a threat. We didn't really need a girl to come protect us, I thought. But then rethought it. Perhaps this was another important narrative being introduced. But Erina looked dubious. You're a girl, after all. But Lisa, Elizabeth is already... Penelope suddenly sounded like she was about to cry. I do hate to put it like this, Erina, but if I stay where it's safe just because I'm a girl and it's scary and dangerous, then I feel like I'll just wind up left behind by all the boys. Elizabeth puts herself in danger and nearly dies, but in the end she got to be with George when it really mattered. She was happy. I know it. This seemed to strike a nerve with Erina, and she thought hard on it. Penelope turned to me. I know it's a sudden request, but take me with you. I promise I won't get in the way. It's dangerous? You probably shouldn't. I know it's dangerous. But... Please, and this whole mess is, in a large part, my fault, so I'd like to see if there's anything I can do about it. Her fault? You made the zombies? I wouldn't do that, but I did turn the entire island of Great Britain into a locked room. Huh? The sheer scale of that statement left me at a loss for words, but at the same time, then she was definitely the cause of this state of affairs, I thought. Then I guess you have a right to be involved. But holy hell, how big was this locked room? Even so, I'd really advise against it, I added. I'm travelling with some pretty weird people. But you're with them too? Don't worry, I can look after myself. The ultimate thing ignored basically everything that passed for common sense with humans, though. I just can't agree, Penelope, Erina said. It's too risky. Penelope wasn't having it. I'm going, Erina. Thank you for everything. I was very happy, but I can't take it anymore. With George gone, there's something dark and hot and heavy churning around inside my chest and stomach and down below, chewing away at me from the inside. If I don't hang every last zombie in England, that churn's going to eat me alive. Penelope. So please, I won't demand your approval, but at the least, don't stop me. But I promise I'm coming back alive. At the very least, I'll bring Elizabeth back with me. I'm not about to be the only one sitting around biding my time. Ha ha ha. Even her laugh was choked with tears. Erina put her arms around Penelope and drew her close. Then go, Penelope. Just be sure you come back. I can't lose any more family. I'll come back safe and sound. Sorry this means you'll have to look after Joseph all by yourself. I know. Joseph will be fine. Straits and the others come to check on us from time to time. And like that, we'd gained a new companion, but... Joseph Joestar? Both women turned and stared at me as one. I had them show me baby Joseph Joestar. There was a baby carriage in the room just off the entrance hall, and he was sleeping inside. His father was George, and his mother was Lisa Lisa / Elizabeth Straits. So he might be a Joseph Joestar, but not the same one who was my adopted great-grandfather. That Joseph Joestar's father was Jojo, and his mother was Maria Uriah Sapelli. But I felt like there was some resemblance, something inherently rascally to him, even as a baby. But most likely, this baby would become the man who went up against the ultimate cause this time and sent him to the ends of space. He was a newborn and already a badass. I grinned at the thought, but I had other fish to fry.
So this is Joseph as a baby. You can already see it in his face,
Carr said, leaning in beside me. His wounds were totally healed. I froze to the spot, my mind utterly blank. Erina and Penelope both threw themselves between the half-naked man and the baby, protectively.
Fear not, I do not make a habit of killing children, and because this man sent me to me every time I am here before you. Besides, if I harmed him, who knows how history would be altered. Come, let us return to the place and time from whence we came, Jorge Joestar,
Carr said, and walked away. I was so relieved. My knees were rattling. What was that? What is he? Penelope said, tears in her eyes. I never saw him come in. That's one of my travelling companions, I said. You sure you're up for travelling with a half-naked mystery man? I definitely thought she wouldn't, but Penelope swallowed once, loudly, and said, I'll be fine. She paused, then added, But he's very scary. Don't worry, I said. I'm scared of him too. Then I took Penelope Della Rosa back to Das Boot. Narancia was hanging out inside, looking bored, and when he saw us, he yelled, Yo, what the fuck? Picked up a girl? Here, now? Are you completely stupid? Are you fucked in the head? He cackled wildly, but I ignored him. Cars and Poochie were waiting inside too, so I introduced Penelope to them and explained that she was joining us on our trip to London, but neither of them seemed particularly interested. Poochie simply glanced at her face once and went back to whatever he was thinking about, so I let it be. Okay, motherfuckers, let's go! Narancia yelled, but I was the only one who yelled, Yeah, let's go, back. So aren't you companions? Why's the mood so tense? Penelope asked. Right, I'd better fill her in. Penelope, you met him a moment ago, but this is Cars. He's the ultimate living being, and the gentleman in the spacesuit is the astronaut, Enrico Pucci. Nice to meet you, Penelope said, but neither reacted. This is a little uncomfortable, she whispered, but there wasn't much I could do to change that. But when Penelope explained what was happening here in England, Pucci's expression changed dramatically. Penelope told us of Jorge Joestar's life, of the 15 locked room mysteries created by the locked room maestro, Javier Cortez. She told us about her power to turn any material into a locked room, manifest the clown within to hang anyone trapped inside and make it look like a suicide. Jorge Joestar called powers like this wounds. They're abilities born of pain inflicted over and over again. I remembered what Cars had said about the bow and arrow he'd made.
In theory, to protect their own lives from the fatal wound, their talents would blossom, the energy would heal the wounds, and they would discover special abilities previously hidden within them.
A wound, being damaged, could give you powers beyond what others had. What did it mean to recover, to heal? As the body attempted to heal itself, it must want to avoid suffering the same injury again, and provide a tool to protect itself. In that sense, both stands and wounds were a manifestation of inner emotions given form. Thinking about this and listening to Penelope, she got to the mass suicide in the church on the Palmer, the pictures of the Mothman drawn while on fire. It took 10 years for George to find out, Penelope said, but when humans are imagining something out of anxiety or fear, what they imagine remains behind, collects, haunts, and can even take on concrete form. That's how there can be a spider with gorilla legs lurking in the darkness underground, how people can die painting pictures of the Mothman on land, and why gremlins appear in the air. Gremlins? Like Mogwai and them? The Joe Dante movie Spielberg produced? Come to think of it, there was a scene where a character's grumbling about having to send foreign-made goods off to be repaired all the time because gremlins live inside and cause trouble. Airplanes are very new and changing rapidly, so there's a lot of trial and error, and people get anxious, which gave rise to the gremlins, Penelope explained. I was nodding as she spoke, but my understanding was quickly turned on its head. The zombie that had played Jorge Joestar as a child, Antonio Torres. Antonio had a wound that allowed him to shed his entire skin once a year. He'd followed George to England and was attacking airplane pilots. This was the start of the stories about gremlins. And alas, her story took us to recent events from a month before. A commander in the Air Force where George served was actually possessed by Antonio Torres. When George found out, he was killed. Penelope was silent for a moment before continuing. I went to the commander's house with Elizabeth. It was here in Wastewood. I saw Elizabeth kill that commander. Antonio Torres was inside his body, and Elizabeth, she was beyond furious. I could tell it was all she could do to keep herself from going mad. She's normally so calm and quick-witted, but she said only one thing. I'm going to kill every last one of you. But I don't think there's any way she can do that. Before she killed Antonio Torres, he said, just go ahead and try. There's 920,000 of me. And that same day, 920,000 Antonios surrounded Great Britain, and I accidentally made a giant locked room out of his bodies. Penelope trailed off, dejected. Cars had been listening with a massive grin on his face.
The attempted invasion of England in 1915,
he began.
"A few dozen units to attack the Hamon warriors, a few hundred to bombard London, but of those few hundred, the pilots themselves were zombies, and the sun wasn't out, so there was no need for Antonio Torres' power. In which case, we can assume no more than 1,000 Antonios at most were used up in the war. If Antonio Torres became a zombie in 1900, and each Antonio shed a skin once a year, that's 14 sheds by 1915, or 2 to the power of 14. So, there should have been exactly 60,384 Antonios. Assuming 1,000 perished, that leaves us 15,384. Then 5 more years passed until 1920, and each of the previous 15 years of Antonios increased by 2 to the power of 6, leaving us with 984,576. In 20 years, Antonio increased himself to nearly 1,000,000. But according to Penelope de la Rosa, her wall was made from 920,000. So what happened to the 60,000 Antonios did not die in the war or get turned into a wall?
Penelope had no answer. Cars chuckled.
What? Never thought to count the zombies before? If there were 60,000 zombies out there, they can turn 10 times that many humans into zombies. I don't mean one can take on 10 men, one can take on 2. But if one has to go after 10 men, then if it manages to turn the first 2, that's 3 against 7. And a moment later, all 10 are zombies. Even if humans manage to win with their 10-to-1 odds. 7 versus 70 leads to all-out panic. And if they have 70 zombies, a town of 1,000 humans is wiped out. Ignoring the existence of 60,000 zombies is rather foolish.
Right. From what I'd heard, the zombies here were nothing like the living dead created by Jorge Romero. Rest in peace. They could think, and they retained skills and knowledge they'd had in life. A former pilot could still fly a plane, and they could even learn to fly one after becoming a zombie. Even a trained fighting force would be thrown into a panic if zombies appeared amongst them. At least 60,000? Trying to picture that nightmare in any concrete terms made me dizzy. Antonio Torres was just a flat skin, so if you folded him up and put him away, maybe he wouldn't spread out that much. But that was just my imagination running away from it. This was a zombie that could fly under his own power, and knew how to fly a plane too. If he tried doing anything to humanity, he'd be a fearsome enemy. This reminded me of the news Shiobana had given me as we fell to earth in the Jotos, of patients in Sardinia attacking people. I'd remembered far too late in all the commotion, but it sure sounded like zombies had shown up in modern Japan and Italy as well. But that was 2012, not here, and in modern times a few dozen times through the birth and death of the universe. What connection could there be between the zombie outbreak here and the news of zombies in our own time? Was a massive zombie outbreak just something that happened at least once in every history? It wasn't out of the question. Our universe had produced cars, the ultimate thing, every time, blown him out into space and gathered him on the dark side of Mars. I'd gone my whole life without knowing the food chain had cars and the other pillar men at the top, vampires below them and zombies below that. They'd always been there. Of course, there were not many zombies who could fly. Zombies were humans to begin with, and there were almost no humans who could fly. Shiobana had also said, "I suppose the key difference from the movies is that there are rumours of flying zombies." If flying zombies existed, did that mean our time also had an Antonio Torres? Had something caused Antonio Torres to time travel? I soon realised the obvious way that might have occurred. Tsukumajuku had left La Palma and fallen through time in the Bermuda Triangle. He'd arrived in Nishiak Katsuki in 2012. I remembered what Tsukumajuku had said in the hospital. "Come to think of it, I had Antonio Torres 1900, his skin, in my luggage. Did it arrive here with me? I was gathering my belongings right before I passed out, and I'm certain I had the tube it was in slung over my shoulder." Tsukumajuku had disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle in 1904. If a zombie Antonio Torres had traded places with the skin sample and travelled through time with Tsukumajuku, then He'd been a zombie 4 years, so 2 to the power of 4 was 16, and that number was then reduced to 15. That number then doubled yearly, and 11 years later, 1915, during the attempted invasion of England, those 15 would be 2 to the power of 10, and 15,360. Assuming 1,000 had died that day, 14,360 would increase over the 5 years until 1920, and including the peeling day from 15, that was 2 to the power of 6, giving us about 919,040 Antonios. Since the assumption that 1,000 had been lost in 1915 was a high estimate, the final figure of 919,040 was fairly close to how many there actually were. So Antonio Torres wasn't hiding another 60,000 of himself somewhere. The 2 to the power of 20 math simply hadn't reflected all actual events. One Antonio Torres had left 1904 and was making zombies in 2012 in Nishiak Katsuki. How long had it been since Tsukumajuku arrived in Nishiak Katsuki? It was less than a day, I was sure. But if their movements were already visible, that spoke volumes about how fast and strong they were at propagating. No. In 2012, there were already zombies. I just hadn't known about them. Had they made contact with Antonio Torres and started the outbreak, in both Japan and Italy? Seemed a bit too far apart, but maybe it had something to do with Morio and Nero turning into rhinoceros beetles? Of course it did. There's no way that was just coincidence. Here in England, the island of Great Britain, Penelope had said she'd made a wall out of the zombies, but if that was the armour and it were to grow legs, and this massive island turned into a really huge rhinoceros beetle? This thought made me jump to my feet. I went out of the room, up to the bridge, up a ladder, opened the hatch, and looked up at the orange western sky from the highest place on Das Boot as it sailed through the forests and meadows on its way to London. The sky was still fairly bright. There was no substantial difference between the sky now and the sky when we'd first arrived. The west was bright and the east dark, stars and moon visible in only half the sky. We'd been here over 2 hours, but the sun still looked to have just vanished over the horizon and stuck there. Or in this world had time itself stopped. Or, I thought, was this island racing after the sun across the surface of the ocean, onwards to the west, towards the centre of the Atlantic Ocean, the ocean that didn't exist in my world. But if we were keeping up with the sun, we must be going really fast. Was it the armour that kept us feeling the G-forces and wind? When Morio started moving, we hadn't noticed until our cross house moved, and we looked down at the sea from the top of the hill. Same thing. No joke. Great Britain was the third rhinoceros beetle. We were riding the back of it again. Someone else came up on the bridge behind me, asking what was up, and of course it was Enrico Pucci, and I figured this religious fervour had sniffed it out. But there was no way to stop his flow now, and it would likely take us to whatever resolution lay in store. I filled Pucci in, and before I was even halfway, he'd figured it out, and got that gleam in his eyes.
We only need one more rhinoceros beetle, a spiral staircase, 2 singularities, and the secret emperor.
What about the fig tart?
Pucci turned and looked at me. Didn't you notice?
Notice what?
When we fell to earth, Kars's body began to burn with a sweet scent. That was the smell of a fig tart.
I was a bit disgusted, actually. I noticed it was a fruity scene, but the reason I hadn't compared it to smells in my memory because it was the smell of burning flesh. Perhaps not human flesh, but of something humanoid that spoke like a man. Perhaps experiences akin to religious miracles overcame basic human impulses like that, or perhaps he just never cared for such things in the first place.
Also,
Pucci said, heedless of the look on my face,
in many countries, figs are believed to be the fruit of immortality, and in the Old Testament, 2 Kings 27, they are described thusly. The prophet Isaiah came to a rich man, Hezekiah, and knew at once there was no saving him. Set your house in order, for you shall die. You cannot live longer. As Hezekiah wept and prayed to God, Isaiah turned to leave, and God spoke to him. Isaiah returned to Hezekiah and said, Take some figs and put them on that swelling, and you will be cured. Well, seems appropriate that Kars's body smelled of figs now, doesn't it?
He fixed his eyes on me, waiting as I desperately tried to come up with any sort of response, when from down below I was surprised to hear the pebble phone go blum 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 blum. Wow, I know they ignored the laws of physics, but to this degree? Narancia called up to me. Hey, George! Where are you? Up here, I said, going back inside the ship. Narancia gave me the phone, muttering, Not like I'd understand any of it. Hello? Bucciolati here. Where are you? Wasn't that you falling on Morio earlier? I think it was, but we've round up somewhere far away, in a way, even farther than Mars. Huh? What do you mean? Stop beating around the bush and speak clearly. We're in England, the island of Great Britain. What? No such country or island exists. We're in a universe and time when they did. A world before the universe died and was reborn, although I'm not sure saying that clears up much of anything. It certainly doesn't. Be that as it may, are you able to get back here? We're attempting to begin looking for a way to do that. Right. How are things over there? Did anything happen to our cross house? I think our spaceship hit it. It did. You crashed through the ceiling and made a dent in the floor. But it's fixed now. The building itself is basically a stand, apparently. The stand girl controlling it is fine too. Oh, good. That's a relief. The main casualty is the manga artist's desk. He was quite irate. What about the American army? Thanks to you and Narancia, only minor injuries on either side. No undead or seriously injured. The Navy units that landed are already starting to surrender. Apparently they are unable to contact HQ at all, and nobody can get in or out. After you crashed, Morio's barrier came back up. The sky's gone pitch black, no moon or stars. Since there's next to no functioning electricity, the entire town is shrouded in darkness. Only our cross house still has lights, water and gas, thankfully. No moon or stars. We could see the sky just fine earlier in the day, so the barrier wasn't opaque or anything. Right, but we can't see anything now. We saw Nero Island rear up from the shock of your impact, but it's vanished now. I think it was knocked away outside of Morio, but since the barrier came back up, we can't be sure. Diavolo's minions remain, so we'd like to draw them out while we can. That's right, you said you found this boss? Diavolo? His body, yes. Who killed him? Who indeed? I've no idea. Was this a Mafia-esque lie or evasion? Can you tell me what you do know? Certainly, he said, and I must have sounded surprised, because he added, well, we have the other detectives here. Even without you, there's a lot we can have inspected. They've proven quite useful. I'm learning how to handle detectives myself. Seems like it'll come in handy. The Mafia's pet detective. I could see that happening. So? We found them both in the central room of the Arrow Cross house, the one Kishibe Rohan calls his study. Huh? So? That's where we found them, both lying on the floor. On the carpet, I suppose. Huh? But that room was totally empty, nothing else in it but the desk. Yes, you've been in and out of it all day, but that's where the two bodies were, and judging by the progression of rigor mortis of the amount of blood in the carpet, and how dry that blood was, they were killed right there, and had been lying there for at least 12 hours. 12 hours? Since 8 this morning. Eh? But that's right after Tsukumajuku's body was found, and tons of cops were going in and out, and yet 2 people were murdered there and nobody noticed the bodies? That's the long and short of it. It is a mystery, but Joestar, is there really any need to solve it? The dead are a mafia boss and a serial killer. I'm not exactly an honest citizen myself, but we're better off with both of them dead. But you've verified both bodies' identities? Yes. Want to see? If there's a way to, sure. Then I'll send them to you. Don't tell anyone, but this is a Baccio stand. Videodrome. I wouldn't, I swear. So a display screen appeared on the surface of the pebble, showing 2 files. First one. First shot was of 2 male corpses on the floor. I'd never seen either face before. One was Japanese in a suit, thin, with hair that was well combed except for a few stray hairs clearly deliberately let loose to suggest fun, in a way that just made him seem all the more fastidious. He was reasonably handsome, but there was something plain and unmemorable about his face, a quality that I knew was really common with serial killers. This type made it a daily effort to not stand out and not draw attention. The other had an obviously sinister set to his face. He had long hair with a bizarre speckled pattern. His eyes were open, but not only were they not rounded, they were twisted, frayed, as if the evil dwelling within had caused an unnatural transformation. He was so obviously weird I didn't see how he could ever live in normal society. The reason he'd hidden himself so thoroughly was clearly because, looking like this, it would be nigh impossible to find a double if his life was in danger, and it'd be very difficult to blend into the crowd or avoid being noticed when out in public. Both their throats had been slit, as deep as Tsukumajuku's wound from ear to ear. They must have died instantly. This was filmed by someone crouching next to the blood-stained bodies. The crouching man was named Leone Baccio, one of Bucciolati's men. He first moved to the Japanese man, removed the suit, peeled off the shirt, and once the man's scrawny torso was revealed, plunged his hand into the stomach. His hand went deep into the body, 10 centimetres past the wrist, and felt around for something. When he pulled his hand out, there was a videotape in it. There was a title written on the spine in Japanese. Kira Yoshikage, July 24th, 2012. There are control buttons directly on the corner of the tape, and when he pressed the triangular play button, the tape unfolded until it was shaped like a man, the dead Japanese man, Kira Yoshikage, the serial killer who made people explode. He was in a state of absolute panic, covered in sweat, the last thing a man as fastidious and unassuming as this killer would want to be. Numbers appeared in the air, like a countdown in an old movie. 3, 2, 1. The man screamed and offered no real resistance as his throat split open, blood sprayed out, and he fell to the floor, dead. Ta-da! The words "the end" appears in the air. Huh? Was that it? Kinda anticlimactic, I thought. Kira's form began to writhe, then folded itself back up into the videotape it had started as. Next, the Baccio reached towards the corpse of the white man with the ultra-weird hair and eyes, peeled off his shirt to expose his belly, and reached inside, rummaging around until he found a videotape. The title was written in Italian. A.K.A. Diavolo, July 24th, 2012. The white man stood up, but he was as beside himself as Kira, his face crumpled in despair. There was a stand behind him, humanoid but with a face like an insect, and another face on its forehead. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. Ah! His throat split up, sprayed blood, and he collapsed. Huh? The same thing here. As I watched the tape fold itself back up, Bucciolati said, "That's it. Shortly after that your ship fell. It was all we could do to grab the bodies and get out." Okay, listen close, Joestar. Videodrome records everything that happens to someone for 24 hours after midnight, but cuts off at the moment of their death. You realize what that means? What? There's no record of them from midnight until 8 a.m., the estimated time of their death. Normally, Videodrome should be able to replay everything they did in that time, but no such thing exists for them. Until 8 a.m., these men were somewhere else, somewhere not of this world. They appeared out of nowhere in the Arrow Cross house just in time to die, lived for approximately 1 second, were killed, died, and then until quite recently, as piles of cops went in and out, and the home's residents went about their business, nobody noticed their bodies lying in the middle of the floor. But that's impossible. But it is the truth. Videodrome replays only truth. And yet, Jorge Joestar, this is a mafia boss and a serial killer. I may be a cold-hearted son of a bitch, but both of them were evil incarnate. This Kira Yoshikage was calling himself Karajiri Kosako. He worked in manufacturing, did his job like anyone else. His wife's an election official, his kids on the soccer team at his elementary school. They seem like an ordinary suburban family, but as the investigation grew close, he brutally murdered both his wife and child. Someone on my team has a unique power that allows them to investigate these things, but he found trophies from over 100 different women in that house. And Diavolo killed far more than 100, and not all of those victims were from enemy crime syndicates. If someone was a problem for him, or if he merely stood to gain an advantage, he'd kill civilians, politicians, law enforcement, even his own men without hesitation. He forced the desperate poor to work for him and then abandoned them, sold repentant children, licked the marrow from the bones of the rich, and forced the world around him and everyone he came in contact with to rot. These two men deserve to die. The world is better off with them dead, so don't worry about it. Huh? Get it? I'll put this plainly. Don't bother trying to figure out the truth behind their deaths. Don't do anything. If you want to write their killer a thank you note, that's one thing. But if you even consider trying to arrest them, in my opinion, you'll be barking up the wrong tree. Them dying is a good thing. Whoever killed them did us all a service. A service to all mankind. My head was going in circles, so I clutched it tight, asking, "Do we know their stand powers?" "Yes. Between Abbacchio's Videodrome and the owner of the Arrow Cross House's stand, we figured it out. This manga artist might be an eccentric, but he has the ideal stand for uncovering people's secrets. Of course, he'll do nothing he doesn't want to, even if you threaten him with force. But if you just convince him it's the right thing to do, he'll jump at it. That got a laugh out of me. Wish I could have seen Kishibe Rohan face down the Mafia. Kira Yoshikage's stand was named Killer Cream, Bucciolati continued. It could make someone explode directly or turn them into a bomb. Two types of bombs. Bombs Killer Queen had to trigger with a switch, and bombs that would explode on contact if someone touched them. It could even remove its left hand and turn it into a tank-like stand called Sheer Heart Attack that would operate automatically, tracking people via their heat signatures. And Killer Queen had one more power. Bites the dust. It remains a bit of an enigma, but it could turn someone into a bomb that would go off if anyone asked about Kira, or the bomb said his name. The moment it killed whoever was searching for him, it would somehow turn back time an hour. Only the person he turned into a bomb would remember the previous version of that day, but the fate of those he blew up would not change, and they would again explode even if the bomb avoided contact with them, with no apparent cause at all. Kira Yoshikage's bites the dust to turn Rohan into a bomb, and it could turn back time. Man, he really had the perfect power for what he was after. And the boss of our Passion family, who called himself the Devil, Diavolo. His stand was named King Crimson. He had a face-type stand on his forehead called Epitaph, and this could accurately predict the future, albeit for only 10 seconds. It could then erase that part of the future, leaving only the experience of it behind, with no other impact on what happened next. Say you ate something and felt full. He could use King Crimson to remove the part where you ate, leaving you with no idea why you felt full. He could predict the future and delete time. No wonder he survived so many assassination attempts. See guys, that's how it works. Bucciolati explained a few mysterious events experienced during syndicate betrayals and conflicts, but I wasn't really listening. I was thinking. Kira and Diavolo both had stands that could in some fashion manipulate time. That was tugging at my mind. Time. Arrow Cross House. Tsukumajuku had died in the Arrow Cross House, but he had travelled in time too. He'd come from England 1904 to Nishiakatsuki and died in Morio in the Arrow Cross House, but appeared out of nowhere in the middle of everything and taken me to Mars. Tsukumajuku had been the first to time travel, and he talked about beyond. The way he'd smiled made me just accept what he was saying, but the first time slip was entirely the fault of the Bermuda Triangle, or at least whatever it was that had created an area that, according to the legends, caused people and ships to vanish. I couldn't explain it, and the logistics of it remained unclear, but it felt like reason enough. But the second, when he'd taken me to Mars, what led to that? I couldn't see it. But obviously, time slip or whatever, if something happened there is a reason for it. I just didn't know what it was. But when Tsukumajuku had smiled, he'd had a reason for it, knew why he was acting, and could have explained it. Otherwise, nobody who called themselves a detective could ever be so carefree. He'd had no time for exposition, but Tsukumajuku had known everything. That was why all the confusion he'd displayed when he arrived in Nishiakatsuki had disappeared. Yeah, because Tsukumajuku had solved all the mysteries. He'd come to me and died. And the reason he'd spoken in riddles wasn't just because he didn't have time to explain properly, but because I was a detective too, and he was having a little fun at my expense. Like you still don't get it, do you? He was ribbing me because I was struggling with something I should have worked out by now. Tsukumajuku knew that I would figure it out. That meant I should be able to solve this. Being flung out to Mars and winding up in England in the distant past may seem completely batshit, but it all had meaning. I knew that. There was no reason to think otherwise. The rules of this world hadn't changed at all. I just had to think it through. Time in the Arrow Cross House. We travelled through time one more time. Kaz's ship had definitely crashed directly on top of Arrow Cross, but we didn't die in the wreck. Instead, we were thrown to England in 1920. Thrown? That's right. We didn't come here. Arrow Cross House had sent us here. That was the purpose of the Arrow Cross House. It could send someone through time and space of its own free will. How? To pass through time, you needed a hole in the space-time continuum, or a wormhole that linked to a different time and place, or you needed to somehow bend space-time and take a shortcut. Wormholes were more or less fixed to specific points in space-time, so the Bermuda Triangle was probably one of those. But the Cross house was different. We'd been thrown super far back, to England in 1920 in a different history of the universe, and it had used poor dead Tsukumajuku to take Narancha and me from Budogoka Academy campus to a spaceship orbiting Mars. Thinking about it, how much free will had Tsukumajuku had? When he appeared before me, he'd seemed to know I was there. "Hey, I'm your instrument. Someone needs you. I'll take you to him." And after he took me to the H.G. Wells, he'd known there would be a spaceship and wasn't surprised by it at all. "Whoops, brought an anomaly along, but it all means something, I'm sure. Bye." If he'd been just a victim, caught up in a time slip and flung here and there, he'd have been confused by it all. He'd never have noticed that Narancha came along. He'd been quite lost the night before when he'd arrived in Nishiakatsuki. "Pardon, que pasó? Donde estoy?" That night, Tsukumajuku was not only super confused, he was even a bit frightened. But after he died when he was taking us to Mars, he'd understood everything, was totally comfortable in his role, and even had time to give me the kind of smirk I could only take as a challenge. By then, he wasn't just aware of what was going on. Tsukumajuku was controlling the time travelling of his own free will. If our Cross House was the device to bypass space-time, Tsukumajuku had learned to use it. Our Cross House could bend space-time and create shortcuts. It could choose a place and time and send us there. It could even act like a delivery service, picking someone up and putting them where they needed to go. But how? How was it bending space-time? There were two ways modern science was aware of: speed and gravity. Giant celestial bodies like suns and black holes could bend the fabric of space-time. Light didn't proceed in a straight line past them. But in Morio, nothing with that powerful a gravitational field existed or could exist inside the house. After all, to increase gravitational pull, you had to increase mass. Morio and the Cross house were too small to contain something that large. To compress the volume of that mass required even more power. If they succeeded, they'd just end up with a black hole. Could Tsukumajuku control something like that? He wasn't even a stand master. If our Cross House's stand power was having a black hole, there'd be more to what it did than just time travel. Things would disappear, be crushed, and it would absorb all light and sound. I'd been in our Cross House and sensed nothing so chaotic. It was quiet, calm, elegant and relaxed, like you'd expect the home of a working author to be. Nothing I'd seen suggested there could be a black hole hidden somewhere. Absorbing? No, that wasn't right, I realised. It couldn't just absorb. Tsukumajuku hadn't just travelled through time. He'd gone back to our Cross House afterward and died. If he'd just been absorbed, he could never have gone back. Maybe there was a way to reverse the gravitational pull, but before considering that, I had to reconsider my initial premise. If our Cross House was the device, could I determine the function from the construction and design? Our Cross House was a functional compass, but the core of it was still the cube house. The Tesseract. The house was made of 8 square rooms that allowed you to move indefinitely in any direction. The key quality lay in that infinite nature, not in any gravitational compression. Okay then, I was about to start going over the idea of using speed, when I realised something. Damn it, I thought. I'd already peered directly into the heart of the cube house's device. When we'd gone to Kashibi Rohan's study with Grand Blue, we'd opened the door in the house and realised if we went 4 rooms down we'd end up where we started. Later on, when they were about to open the door again, Sugimoto Reimi warned me not to fall straight down. We'd all instantly pictured what would happen. The room below the room below the room below this one was the study, so if I broke through all 3 I'd fall forever. What would happen then? If gravity increased my fall speed here, I'd fall until I hit terminal velocity. That was as far as I'd thought through it then, but perhaps that velocity wouldn't be terminal, but instead bend space-time. It already had, when we fell out of the sky and landed on the Cross House. We'd gone through the ceiling of the cube house, smashed Rohan's desk to bits, burst through the door underneath it, and the floor below, and gotten lost in the infinite loop. Normally air resistance would have been slowing us down, but inside the cube house we'd sped up until we were going fast enough that time and space bent around us. And then what? Which direction had it bent? Without knowing it was a time travel device, we'd simply fallen. No conscious will was at work. We didn't consciously want or try to go anywhere. If the device was activated but received no orders and we just kept going faster and faster, how would the device handle that? If the device could be controlled at will, and there was no will present within the device, it must take input from outside sources. The device would then connect us to the will of someone far away. That was it. The infinite vertical shaft at the heart of the Hour Cross house was a device to bend space-time. If the people falling through it wanted to go somewhere, it could send them there. But if the people falling expressed no such desire, then it could pick up on the desire of someone outside. Sukumajuku knew this, which explained why he'd said, "I am your instrument." I'd caught up with Sukumajuku. All of this took about 30 seconds. Bucciolati was still going on about what a piece of shit Diavolo had been, and didn't seem to have noticed that I'd gone quiet. What he was saying made a certain amount of sense, but he was a gangster, and didn't understand. "Bucciolati," I said, "I can't move forward if I don't solve the mystery. That's the nature of a detective." "Oh," he said, and then said what anyone with a deep understanding of human work and duty would say. "In that case, go ahead." "Yo, we can see London," Narantia said, so I hung up the phone and went up to the bridge, and saw a huge city covered in rubble from the fierce battles fought there. "This must be Desolation Row," the priest said, collecting yet another of his simples. "We've been waiting for you, our very own angel, Enrico Pucci," came a voice. We turned, and two men stood on the deck of Das Boot as it moved through the forest. I recognised one of them, a well-dressed man with distinctive swirls of hair. "I am the President of the United States, Funny Valentine," he said. This wasn't Funny from 2012, but the Funny from this world. He was young, but looked exactly like the Funny and the funnier and the funniest I'd seen on TV. Funny ignored us, speaking only to Pucci, who appeared to be at a loss. "You look surprised, Father. As a man of faith, you didn't think to be called an angel yourself? Be that as it may, all that remains is one rhinoceros beetle, two singularities, and a spiral staircase. For the last rhinoceros beetle, if you follow the bank of the Thames to the south, you'll soon see it. Or perhaps since I'm here, you already understand. We've come to meet you, to take you to the island that will become the centre of the world. It is, of course, in our United States. Now and when you were there." "And there is a church." "Exactly. There is also a church named for that which we serve. Trinity Church." "Indeed. There are 3 churches of that name in America, but only one on the island." "New York." "Manhattan Island." "Precisely. I've just been to see it. The 4th rhinoceros beetle is Manhattan." Great Britain was headed west, the mouth of the Thames at its fore. It had crossed the Atlantic and clambered up onto the United States. The giant insect's countless legs straddled the Hudson, half in Connecticut and half in New York. It headed north into New York Harbour, the tips of the skyscrapers at eye level. But Great Britain showed no signs of slowing down. "But Manhattan's not a real rhinoceros beetle, I'm afraid," Funny said. Great Britain's southern extremity stepped up onto Manhattan, tackling the skyscrapers and flattening the island. "As president, I find this situation regrettable, but to build greater prosperity for America, it's time to cut the country loose. This is, well, a sort of ritual, an initiation." Thanks to the wall surrounding Great Britain, we couldn't hear the sounds of it or feel the vibrations, but we knew it must be a living hell down below. Narantia and Penelope were as shaken as I was. All 3 of us must have looked ready to faint. "We must move forward, Father Pucci," Funny said. "Have you found the singularity yet?" "Huh?" "Think! What is a singularity but a point? A point is but part of a line. A line is a connection. And what is a connection?" Pucci stepped forward to stand beside me. "Time," he said. "Time's relation to man." Funny cried. "Well put. 2 are enough. And what are the 2 times?" "Time I have lived through, and the time I'm living." "Yes, that's it. And the 2 that connect them?" "Myself and God, is what I would have said, but judging from your arrival, that may not be the case." "In which case, me and myself." "You have it! You are connected to yourself, Father Pucci, as am I to me." "You know me well, but not this me, correct?" "Correct. But we are linked. How so?" I am me, but at the same time I'm not. How could this be true? I believe you know the answer, Father Poochie.
Yes, I do.
Please share.
Because I could make a connection. Because I can't make the connection. Because what I create is the spiral staircase.
Very good. Just one last thing. Allow me to introduce the Secret Emperor.
Funny gesture to the man beside him, a tall, muscular man brimming with power. I'd seen him before, in the photo Cars projected. The sinister man floating in the air above Cape Canaveral, the adopted son of the Joestar family, the one who'd botched a train robbery. Dio Brando.
You may love me, Enrico Poochie, Dio said. There was a crown of thorns around his head, holes in the hands he held out, and his bare feet. When he saw this stigmata, Poochie wept.
My lord!
And Poochie began to cast aside his stand. Arrows appeared all over Whitesnake's body, and Poochie began to levitate. In that instant, I could no longer stand normally on the desk of Dos Boot. Unless I focused my mind on Poochie as he floated, I didn't feel like I was standing upright, didn't feel balanced. Everyone else was staggering, their gaze focused on Poochie's head, like a shot from this music video for Smooth Criminal. I could see funny Valentine's coat flapping, though there was no wind. Poochie had become absolute up, the centre of all things, and everything radiating out from around him was now down. Dio and Cars alone stood normally, as straight as they ever had, but not because his force wasn't acting on them. Just they both possessed the physical strength needed to ignore the change in gravity. Cars' long hair and Dio's cape were pulled towards Poochie, just as we were. The higher Poochie rose, the closer we came to what had originally been bolt upright. Poochie was the centre of gravity, and looking up at him, one thought ran through my mind. Gravity. If you could control it at will, you could bend space and time. And that's why Poochie was killing his own stand. With the arrows covering every inch of it, cracks were beginning to run across the surface of Whitesnake, and as it shattered, a clockman on a two-legged horse emerged.
So this is made in heaven,
Poochie said, enthralled. Cars stood behind us, paying Poochie no heed. His eyes were on Dio, who met his gaze, his smile as brazen as before.
Now, let us go to heaven!
Poochie cried, and a moment before he activated Made in Heaven, Dio held up his hand, and the wall of air that covered Great Britain formed the upside-down upper half of a giant buoy, which rose up and looked down at us. Its eyes were open, but it had no eyes. This was a combined version of all the Antonio Torreses that Penelope had made the wall from. Hanging upside down from the sky wall, it reached out its massive hand and snatched Poochie out of the air. Dio looked up at Poochie and said,
Don't be in such a rush, gutter trash. Your job is to sweep and clear the outside.
How mean! Penelope yelped and clapped her hands over her mouth. But trapped in the giant's hand, Poochie's expression was as rapturous as ever. Fused Antonio Torres swallowed him whole, sending him outside the armour. Normal gravity returned, and above us, Poochie activated Made in Heaven. Outside the rhinoceros beetle called England, time sped up. The sun and moon whipped round us, but the zombies were hiding in shadow and would not die. In a blink of an eye, the universe ended and began again. Trembling, Penelope reached out and took hold of my sleeve as I started counting universes. Outside England, in Antonio Torres' belly, the universe looped 36 times, bringing the island of Great Britain to the 2012 we'd come from. We landed just in time to flip Morio over. We were back. Had our 6-month journey back from Mars taken only 4 hours because of Poochie's stand too? I asked Cars.
Yes, but not quite,
Cars said.
That man was in a small box with a much more complicated time flow compressed within, at the same time as he was on the spaceship with us.
A small box?
Somewhere beyond the ends of the world.
What? I didn't get this at all. What was Poochie doing there?
Killing a man.
That cleared up nothing, but when I looked up out of the rhinoceros beetle, Poochie was no longer floating above us. End of chapter 14.